just ensure that the commissioners and the city staff or city council members are the only ones that show on the screen. Okay, I see at least 4 commissioners. So I think that would be sufficient to start the meeting. Let's do a quick roll call here and then officially declare the meeting open. I see Vice Chair. Hello, Stevie. Okay, I know that Commissioner Ambiya is out tonight. And I see Commissioner Venkatraman. Hello, Suresh. I also see Commissioner, or at least I did see at some point in time, Commissioner Cutts. There he is. Okay. Hello, Steve. And I think that's the only one I see. So with that, we have enough quorum to start the meeting. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 28th of April Complete Streets Commission meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. As usual, I'm going to give everyone 20 seconds to recite it in private, beginning now.
Yes.
Okay, so if you are not speaking, please mute yourself. Mr. Daniel's iPad, please mute your iPad. Thank you. And Gaku, if you can hear me, please make sure that if you're not a commissioner or a city staff member, that they don't appear on the screen. Great. So as usual, this is the regular meeting of the Complete Streets Commission, which means we start with items that are not on the agenda. That means anyone who wishes to speak on any item that is currently not on the agenda, this is your chance to do so. If there are anyone who wishes to speak, please raise your hand or unmute and identify yourself. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So I'm going once.
So, Chair, did we get a request for an accommodation for someone to speak?
Once we get, this is for on the agenda. We're still on items off the agenda, not on the agenda. Okay, I don't see anyone who is asking to speak. So with that, I'm going to proceed forward and then move to the first item. I guess the request, Jaime, is at 5:40. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. It was from Mr. Dan Cohen. So I don't know if he's online
okay, so
right now, but he is.
As soon as Mr. Cohen shows up on the attendance list, I'm going to give him the floor for 3 minutes. Until then, let's go ahead and proceed with the agenda. So let's start with the meeting minutes. And do we have any? Okay, this is very busy screen here, Gaku. I'm seeing a lot of names and I can't figure out who's who. So let's start with the minutes, please. Any comments on the minutes on the commission, please? Okay, I see heads shaking. I'm going to take it as a no comments. So anyone who wishes to put forth a motion to approve the minutes? Suresh?
Yeah, I move to approve the CSE meeting minutes from 3/31/21.
Great. Any second? Wow, should I pass out the coffee? Steve, you want to unmute?
I second it.
Great. All in favor? Let's see. Let's start with the vice chair. All right.
Yes.
Steve and Suresh and Cindy, welcome. All right. So we have another commissioner tonight. Great. And I'm in favor. So we have 5 votes in favor and the motion passes. So meeting minutes on March 31st are approved. So before we move into item number 2, the San Antonio development, I want to give Mr. Cohen the chance to speak if he is on the list. Mr. Cohen, if you have dialed in or you've signed on, identify yourself.
Yes, I'm on Daniel's iPad. Can you see me?
No, but we can hear you. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. This is regarding the Cuesta speed bumps. I've been a homeowner and taxpayer in Los Altos for over 20 years, and my children attended the public schools here. As such, I understand the need to find solutions to speeding cars and distracted drivers. However, I'd like to share how the speed bumps on Cuesta have had a significantly negative impact on my life. I have a seating disability due to a nerve injury, and while I can drive with some discomfort over normal-sized speed bumps, the installed bumps are exceptionally high. The staff report states that during the construction phase, a decision was made to make the speed bumps higher than what was originally planned in the full community discussions. However, the traffic data in the report compiled by the staff shows that the percent reduction in speed on Cuesta with the higher speed bumps was no better than what was achieved on Arboleda with smaller bumps. But was there a downside to the larger bumps? The installed speed bumps are higher than any I have experienced, and even driving very slowly at less than 10 miles per hour worsened my injury. In fact, I'm at the airport on my way to Arizona to get treated by a nationally known specialist. Over the last few months, I've had to avoid Cuesta. That requires me to spend more time in my car, which is painful for someone with a sitting disability. Cuesta is a main artery of Los Altos, and if you live near it as I do, it's very difficult to get to downtown Los Altos or to one of the cross streets that take you to El Camino without traveling on Cuesta. So what are some alternatives to the current speed bumps that would still achieve the objective of traffic calming? There are many that in combination, I believe could achieve the same objective. These include, number one, adding stop signs, for example, at the corner of Arboleda and Cuesta. Number two, painting the bike lanes green on Cuesta, as has been done in other cities to provide more visibility to drivers. Number three, installing 15-mile-per-hour speed limit during school hour signs, as is done near schools, and adding back the electronic signs that show each driver his or her speed. Number four, installing radar that automatically detects speed and gives tickets, as is done in France and other countries. Number five, having police officers stationed on Cuesta during school hours. Number six, finally, while I would prefer no speed bumps of a similar size and shape as on Springer Road near Rosita, which are the size used in school zones up and down the peninsula, are less excruciating. I believe that a combination of some or all of these alternatives would be as effective or perhaps even more effective than the very large speed bumps on Cuesta. The website of the Complete Streets Commission
Mr. Cohen,
states—
you're past your 3 minutes, so I'm going to give you a few more seconds to finish your sentence.
Thanks. I just have two more sentences. The website states that complete streets are streets for everyone. Shouldn't that include those of us with sitting disabilities? I believe that if we're creative and collaborative, together we can find a way to make Cuesta safe and a street for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, and have a safe trip.
Thank you.
All right, for the rest of the audience, we had to accommodate Mr. Cohen because he actually is about to board an airplane. So for all discussion items relating to Cuesta, you're gonna have to wait until the item comes up for discussion. So please, if you raise your hand, you're gonna have to just bring it back down again. All right, so with that, let's move to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the San Antonio Road Development. And I believe
I have a question.
Mr. Khatri, you are not allowed to speak right now. If you anything on the not on the agenda, you may just quickly ask. I'll give you the couple of minutes to give your opinion. But if it's on the agenda, then you have to wait until that comes up.
I was wondering if I have an opportunity to comment on Mr. Dan Cohen's request.
No, you may not.
That comes up later.
That is not an open discussion item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think Mr. Golden, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair and the rest of the commissioners. I'm Steve Golden, Senior Planner for the Planning Division. I'm here to present this item to you. I'm sharing my screen, so just confirming that everybody can see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. And you can hear my audio okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is the 428 South San Antonio Road. So the goal of this session is to bring you this pre-application for this development project, and the goal is to receive feedback from the Complete Streets Commission on the multimodal transportation aspects of the project, which would then inform the formal submission, the formal application of the project's entitlements for the build out of this project. Just a really brief explanation, which is in much greater detail in the agenda report, but the applicant did submit this as a SB 330 project, that's Senate Bill 330. And there is it's a two-step process, and we're currently in the pre-application phase. So the city is limited in what we can ask for and what the developer has to submit to the city as far as information for this project. And basically, there's some provisions in SB 330 which locks in certain development standards, fees, and a process for this project to go through should they submit a formal application. Just to let you know also, with these types of projects, we do have a number of public meetings that city staff will take this project through. But SB 330 does limit the city to only 5 public meetings once they submit the formal application. We're in the pre-application stage, so that 5 meeting limit doesn't apply quite yet. So we did take this to the Planning Commission for feedback on the design on April 15th. Of course, here tonight we're at the Complete Streets Commission, and then we foresee when the formal application comes in, we haven't had any quite yet, but I think there was another project that was taken to your commission, and there was discussion of potentially a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and this Complete Streets Commission. And again, that was because we have limited number of meetings and to give more opportunity for meetings for the city council should they need those. So let's get into the project. The project is proposed. It's located on the west side of South San Antonio Road at Lyle Street. It's a nearly 13,000 square foot property, which is 0.3 acres in size. The existing site includes a single-story commercial building with approximately 5,500 square feet of commercial space. It houses the original Pancake House and a personal service use, which is the Pilates Athletic Center. So it's a pretty prominent site there on South San Antonio Road. I've just highlighted on this particular slide the other projects in the downtown area in the vicinity. There's, as you probably are aware, there's a number of projects moving forward on that First Street corridor. There are some projects that are now under construction, and we foresee, construction of those projects to continue. The proposed project will be, let me just go back to the slide. The proposed project is a 4-story building, including 23 residential units and 2,600 square feet of commercial space. Oops. Just jumped ahead, there we go. So this is just a slide showing looking southbound on San Antonio Road towards Foothills Expressway. Most people are pretty familiar with the site because it's on South San Antonio Road. So you're aware that San Antonio Road has commercial buildings on either side. On the east side of San Antonio Road, further away from San Antonio is residential, and then of course there's downtown Los Altos on the same side of San Antonio as the subject site. And it is, I should note that this is a view of that intersection of Lyle and South San Antonio Road. It is a fairly complex intersection where Lyle, 2nd Street, and San Antonio all intersect. It was identified as in the collector traffic calming plan in 2011 as a intersection. It was a priority intersection, and as you can see in this photo, and you'll see in the next one, there was a signalized crosswalk installed, I believe it was in 2013, across San Antonio Road, and it eliminated the crosswalk across San Antonio on the south side of the intersection, and which was directly in front of the subject site. So this is a close-up view of the subject site. The bank property, which is under common ownership, it's a separate property and it's not being proposed for development. So that will remain for some time. There is the developer and owner has told us that there is a long-term lease on that site. So it's to the left of that, again, the original Pancake House and the building further to the left of that. South San Antonio Road does have existing Class 2 bike lanes, VTA bus route 40, which provides transit between Foothill College and the Mountain View Transit Center via North Bay Shore. Also travels along San Antonio Road, and there's stops nearly in front of the subject site. The project will eliminate approximately 100 feet of curb cut along the project frontage, which you can see in this photo. It will also eliminate the 7 surface parking spaces in the front, but they will improve the pedestrian streetscape to include landscaping and street trees, which you can see on this slide is a site plan which shows the layout of the building at ground level. Pedestrians will access the building from South San Antonio Road, where there's approximately 2,600 square feet of commercial space and a lobby for the residential units. Vehicular access is at the rear through the public alley, which you would enter into the garage at the rear. And as we've reported with other projects, and it's a similar situation with this project, the public alley is currently 16 feet wide, and we'd be asking for a 2-foot dedication on the rear of this, along the rear of this property. So once we get 2 feet on both sides, the future width would be a 20-foot alley. We've also identified that there are some utilities in that alley which would have to be removed or undergrounded, and that would be further analyzed with the formal application in their engineering designs. Again, the bank building shown as the existing building right on that corner would remain for some time. With regards to parking, we provided this table in the agenda report. If this project went through just under zoning code standards, it would require 48 parking spaces. However, with the density bonus allowances, there is an exception, a standard exception that this project would be eligible for. So it would reduce the parking requirement down to 39 spaces. They are proposing 47 spaces. 40 of those would be, 40 of those would be within a mechanical parking lift system. And then 7 of those spaces would be just conventional surface parking stalls. And then we would expect this project to provide bike parking at a ratio of 1 Class 1 parking space per 3 units, or 8 total spaces, and that's a minimum, and 1 Class 2 bike parking spaces per 15 units, or a minimum of 2. That's the minimums, but of course like the vehicular parking could incorporate more into this project. So with the formal application, we would expect a lot more information to be submitted. They will have to address vehicle miles traveled as the city adopts its policy. They will have to address that regardless per state law, but we'll have to address the city's policy, which is, as you know, is ongoing right now. And then as things kind of progress with a VMT policy, we still have a level of service policy per our general plan. And if that changes, they'll have to address those service levels as well. And then we would expect them to submit and for the city to analyze operational issues, including site access, circulation, pedestrian safety, and those sorts of operational issues. Just a little plug for this project, information that can be found on the city's website. You can go to the Community Development Department, the planning section of the Community Development Department, and make your way to development projects and find this particular project under multifamily and commercial. That's where we're trying to provide all information for residents and the commission members to look back if people are interested in following along in this project, and seeing what information is available. That's as far as I will go with my presentation. The applicant is available as well. I can take any questions now if you might have them, or if you would like to allow the applicant to provide some comments, whatever you wish to do at this point. Again, it's a study session, so you would also take some public comment if there's any public comments as well.
Steve, thank you. If the applicant wishes to speak or add any more color or information to what you have presented, this is your chance.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening to everybody present on tonight's call. My name is Jan Hockhauser. I'm working with the ownership as the architect for the project. If I could ask Steve to share his screen, the site plan again, it might be helpful to use that as an exhibit to talk to. Steve, is that possible?
Steve, can you share the screen?
Yes, I thought the screen was still shared. Give me 1 sec. I apologize. Is it up now?
Yeah, that's it right there.
Okay,
So as proposed right now, this is a 23-unit project with a commercial component and a residential entry lobby that's accessed from South San Antonio Road, and the vehicular parking was accessed from the alley, and we exceed the parking requirement with this proposal. That being said, we've taken advantage of some of the extensions of the 2nd Street right-of-way, which right now are a small parking lot in front of the project site that has access through a curb cut to San Antonio Road. And because of the issues with proximity to the intersection and the policies of pedestrian-friendly frontages, we've enhanced that pedestrian frontage with a small plaza, some more plantings, and more or less traded a parking lot and a curb cut for a more organized and, for lack of a better term, friendly utilization per policy. The commission's review of this had expressed concern about the alley, the overuse of the alley, because the hardware store on the other side of the alley and the back of the bank. But any redevelopment of those projects would require widening to kind of address the future use. And I would like to state that this project represents an improvement to the width and treatment of the alley. So that's just a basic summary. I just wanted to make sure that the commission saw those basic features. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockhauser. All right. I'm actually going to open it up to the public for any comment and then bring it back to the commission. So 2 minutes for anyone who wishes to speak on this topic from the public. I see one hand raised. Anyone else? Okay, Roberta, go ahead. You get 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. So I actually did listen to, I went to the planning commission meeting. I'm really disappointed that they did not show the picture of what the building is going to look like. Because number one, the problem with the alley is a really big problem. I know that they haven't really looked into it all the way, but 16 feet is way too narrow. They don't have the design of how the cars will, if it's going to be a one-way or a two-way, or where the garbage will be, or if the utility lines can actually be buried. The front of the building, they want to have 1.75 feet from the sidewalk. And it is way too close to the road. And even though they show pictures of landscaping, there is no room for landscaping. They showed you a diagram that has no measurements on it. So I think that you really need to have additional maps that were presented to the planning commission to see what it's really going to look like and how difficult it's going to be to walk on the sidewalks or connect with the downtown, and having 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 cars go down Lyle Street and over between the hardware store and the back of the bank is really going to be a challenge. And they really do not show you the cutouts, for the driveways on San Antonio Road and how they're going to be doing that. So I think there's a lot more research and a lot more information that they actually have that they can share with you. That said, I was in favor of having this at this location as a good location. I appreciate all the work that Steve Golden is doing. So I don't want to just come off as being negative, but there are some really major challenges. The Planning Commission felt that this was, sort of the entry to Los Altos, that the building really didn't fit in. It was very, very oversized for that location.
Roberta, you're past the 2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Seconds.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to bring you back to the commission. Actually, let me just double check. There's no one else in the public who wishes to speak. Anyone who wishes to speak, raise your hand. This is your last chance. Okay, with that, let's bring it back to the commission. I'd like you, in interest of time, to combine your questions and feedback to the city planner and the developer, please. But actually, before we do that, Steve, can you please help us understand what is it specifically that you're looking for from the commission tonight?
It's really any feedback that you might have with regards to, your responsibility for addressing multimodal transportation issues. Again, we're at the very preliminary stage, so there isn't the complete application package that you would see with a formal application. But you can, if there's comments at this point in time, certain expectations that you think the project should meet, other concerns that you might have to address, again, transportation related issues, then that's kind of this is kind of the opportunity to do it.
Is it fair to say that this will come back in front of this commission again in the future once the plans are more rigorously developed, I suppose?
Yeah, so that is a requirement that all projects be reviewed by this commission, and that would be done after, subsequent to them submitting a formal application and getting staff feedback at that point. Again, because the state requirements with SB 330 projects, we haven't fully flushed it out, but there has been discussion about trying to do some joint meetings with the Planning Commission just for development review purposes. Again, because there's a limited number of meetings, and being able to have that meaningful conversations and public input while meeting the state's requirements for the 5 meeting maximums.
Great, thank you. So let's bring it back to the commission. Let's start with the vice chair. Questions and comments, let's keep them fairly succinct, please.
Okay, great. I just have some comments. And thank you, Mr. Hockhauser, for bringing this project to us. I think I'm going to comment on some of the things that were raised tonight, and also maybe just give you a feeling for some of the things that we'd like to see when you bring this back from a transportation perspective. The first thing is, I think we'd like to have more details. So number one, bicycle parking and storage. The VTA guidelines are too small or too low, and other developments have provided more bicycle and parking and storage. So we would request that you would do that as well. In lack of guidelines, the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition has some bicycle storage guidelines. The second thing, electric vehicle charging. We'd like to know your plans for that, meeting the city and state ordinances, and sort of future proofing the infrastructure of your building as electric vehicles and even bicycles become more popular. The parking lift, we'll want to know about the battery backup system. Does it fit large SUVs and vehicles? We want to make sure, I couldn't tell in the visuals, it looks like it's just a parking lift system and some flat parking, not tandem parking. We're not particularly in favor of tandem parking. For landscaping, just give us a sense of what it looks like and if it aligns with the first streetscaping. Also on 2nd Street by some of the nearby neighbors, I saw a lot of GSI, the green stormwater infrastructure, in their landscaping. So we'd just like to know how you're aligning with the neighborhood. The next thing, traffic and circulation. This is really important. The city, we are very much interested in maintaining a LOS policy, and we'd also like to, if you qualify, look at a traffic impact analysis. I think particularly looking at the circulation of that intersection of Lyle, 2nd, and San Antonio, and if that should remain. I know there's a concrete island in the center, and how that's all going to flow, particularly as there's increase with your development and other developments around it, increased flow. The sidewalk width as well. I know we were widening 1st Street sidewalks. I can't remember if we did that on Lyle, so perhaps staff can advise you on that. The San Antonio sidewalk, that's great that you're proposing to close off some of those vehicle entries in and out so we can have a more continuous sidewalk for safety. I know one of the public speakers raised, essentially where's the building, where's the sidewalk, and what's the setback. So maybe if we could look at that, what the guideline, what the city ordinances are for setback, and what's actually optimal for safety of pedestrians and walkability. The other thing is the sidewalks, as you, if you're in this building, as you enter and exit, whether it's the bank, or I guess this project isn't the bank, but how will people flow in and out on the sidewalks through that intersection? I know when I walked around myself, I found that there's a sidewalk by the bank and there isn't one by the hardware store. So if I'm heading towards 1st Street, how do I get there? And if I walk on the opposite side of the street, it was only on half of the street as well. And then if I want to, I guess if I'm crossing then to go to downtown, like should there be an additional sidewalk in that intersection? Just to hurry it along, I think we should also, we'd want to understand a plan of how people are accessing the lobby, like from the parking area and flow, like the actual flow. And we also want to see a flow of bicycles. So where is the bicycle parking? Where do they come off of the street? Where do they go into the bicycle parking area? Are they going through the elevator? is it safe for kids to move from wherever they enter the building to the storage area and they're not interacting with the vehicles in the parking lot? We'd want to see that. And then in terms of the alley, and this is probably perhaps more for the city staff, take a look at that alley and the utilities and, make sure we know what we're getting into in advance and what's possible and what's not possible. We'd like to know the route to the schools. So where do the kids who will live in this building, what's their path and route to go to school so they can get from your building to a school route safely. And then we want to know the garbage collection plan, when and who takes it in and out, where it's going to be, so that doesn't interfere with bicycles, pedestrians, other traffic, as well as delivery and loading areas and things like that. And then a construction mitigation plan. So that's kind of important for our community as well. A couple quick bullets for staff, and thanks for all the time here. On our minds, as always, is the cumulative impact of traffic and parking as we continue to bring these projects into downtown. So in addition to individual project proposals, we have to think about that. We also should look at doing our developer checklist, because I think that'll make our meetings more efficient. So we don't have to provide, all this information verbally. We can share some of it with the developers in advance. And I'd still like to understand the logistics for our joint meeting with the Planning Commission, because that'll just be an additional meetings for us and how we're going to run that streamlined and efficiently. And the final thing is, Steve, without calling you out too much here, can you check your parking math? Because when I totaled the columns, where you got 48, I got 53. So just give your parking math a check. So thank you for bringing this project forward, Mr. Hockhauser.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Who would like to go following Stacy after this comprehensive list? Suresh.
Oh, thanks. Wow, Stacy, I think she captured pretty much a lot of the points that I was going to make. The only thing I wanted to clarify to make sure is it's not clear, the ingress of and the access to where the bike storage facilities would be, and how that might interact with the mechanical and the power lift system, and if kids would be storing bikes anywhere close to that area. And I think that safety aspect, I don't think we've seen anything like this in this area, and especially when there are kids and children around, that safety would be a concern. So that's my additional comment question.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Cindy?
Hi, I just adding to that last comment, in another development review, there was a member from the public who also made a very similar comment around making sure that the storage facilities are safe for whoever's accessing it, whether it's a kid or somebody who's alone at night. And so second part of that is also paying attention to some lighting in the parking area. And then in general, we agree with everything Stacy said. I think one of the things that is hard to see from these initial diagrams is just the flow of all types of traffic and movement. So whether it's a vehicle, a person walking, a pedestrian, or a bicycle, how are they moving in and around and through the building to get to nearby destinations? That's something from our perspective is going to be important from a safety and traffic perspective, so we can see where there might be bottlenecks or areas that we want to mitigate, conflict areas that we want to mitigate. So being able to see that would be helpful. And then one last comment is, I'm not as familiar with what is the standard for accessible parking spots, but 2% sounds a little bit low. I don't know if that's the normal standard or if anybody else has any reference points for other developments in Los Altos, but it sounds low.
5% would be the code standard. 5%.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Yang. I think, Steve, you got your hand raised. Go ahead, please. Unmute. Steve, can you please unmute?
How can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, yes.
Great. So Stacy, thank you for that comprehensive list, and thank you for the Planning Commission and developer for bringing this to us early. I only have a couple comments. What we saw in that drawing is clearly not detailed enough for what I would like to see going forward, and since it's very early days, that makes sense. Given the fact that it's a mixed use project with both commercial and residential, I would expect that there's going to be a lot of traffic in and out of the building, and that we're going to have more traffic past the building on Lyle and Second, but also on San Antonio. And when they come back, what I would like to see is really some detailed drawings of whether or not there's any encroachment in terms of the current pedestrian and cycle access past the building in all those major thoroughfares. And for example, if somebody is walking past with a double stroller and somebody's coming from the other direction with a single stroller, you know, can they get past without having to be forced into the street on a very busy street? So I think once we see that level of detail, then we can give some, certainly from my perspective, some much more detailed feedback.
Thank you, Steve. Tom, any comments?
I think everything was covered very well so far. Thanks.
Indeed, indeed. I think, thank you to all the commissioners. I really don't have much to add here. Hopefully, Mr. Hochhauser and Steve, that was enough feedback for you tonight. If I may impose on my vice chair and make a request, since she is so rigorous with all those, keeping tab of all those items, if you may just share with the city staff your tentative checklist so we can actually get that ball rolling, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for their comments, and we look forward to coming back with a lot of refinement and detail to satisfy the goals and policies that this commission represents. So again, thank you for your comments.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, with that, we're going to actually move to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the Cuesta Drive Traffic Calming Project. And I know that we've got many folks in the audience today who would like to speak on this topic. If I could get a show of hands in terms of who wishes to speak on this item, just please go ahead and just can get a head count. I see 8 so far. 9. Okay. Very well. So please be patient with us. First, we're actually going to have the city present their findings, and then we'll take input from the public. So Jaime, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to, give me a second while I start my presentation. Oops. Just checking if you can see my screen and if you're seeing the notes or the actual presentation.
Yes, we do.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm sure this will be a large topic of interest to the audience. And I really want to thank the commission for their past help in helping us kind of develop this project and bring it back to yourselves and the community for a post-construction project update. This is the Cuesta Drive, Arboleda Drive traffic calming project. When this was put out to bid, it was bid just as Cuesta Drive, but as you recall, this project did include traffic calming measures along both Cuesta Drive and Arboleda Drive, Cuesta between El Monte and Springer, and Arboleda between Cuesta and Springer.
Jaime, can I just interrupt you? Sorry. Suresh, is it a quick question?
Yeah, I need to recuse myself from this item. So I just want to let you guys know.
Very well. Okay. I guess
Drop off Zoom and I'll wait for Jaime to let me know when to jump back.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
All right, thanks.
Jaime,
Okay,
back to you.
so okay, thank you so much. A quick background for yourselves and for the audience. The Crested Drive traffic calming project is actually a relatively old project. The project started in the mid 2010s and actually started as a design phase in 2018 for 2 raised intersections at Cuesta and Campbell and Cuesta and Clark. During the initiation of the design phase, there was a lot of community discussion regarding whether or not the proposed project at the time would actually be sufficient enough to help reduce speeds along Cuesta Drive between that project corridor between El Monte and Springer. And we went ahead and started a new planning phase right after the design started. And we worked with the residents to develop the project that was built, which included speed humps along Arboleda Drive and speed tables along Cuesta Drive. Now, traditionally, when we do neighborhood traffic management on local streets like Arboleda, those are typically done separately from Collector Street traffic calming, which would include Cuesta. And normally the city would ask residents on the local street, like such as Arboleda, to participate in the construction costs of whatever solutions are developed with the community. But in this specific case, the city council and the commission and the city staff all recommended to build the project together. And we didn't ask for residents along Arboleda to participate in the cost of the project. We moved into a construction phase in 2020, following an almost year of community engagement for the planning and design. And we moved into this post-construction phase just this month in April. We were originally hoping to do data collection in March, but we actually had a wet March. And so we didn't want to risk having the data skewed by wet weather, even though we were already being skewed by COVID traffic conditions. So we waited until April, and we just literally got the data a couple of weeks ago. So we rushed through the analysis that we're going to be presenting to you here tonight. And what we're looking to do today is just present that post-construction data to yourselves and the community, identify if there are any necessary adjustments to the project that was deployed along Arboleda, Cuesta, and portions of Campbell, and then ask yourselves to consider permanent or recommendation for permanent retention of this project to the city council, which we would then do later this spring. So just in advance, or to let you guys know what we did to help prepare for tonight's meeting, because there's been a lot of interest, email chatter and kind of blog chatter about Cuesta Drive. We actually went out of our way to try and make sure we got people to be aware that we were having this meeting tonight. We don't typically do this for a project, but we actually did do a citywide mailer to all households in the city of Los Altos. So we sent a little over 10,000 mailer notices to homes to ask people to participate in tonight's meeting. We also did our standard kind of sandwich board kind of community notices out along Arboleda and Cuesta Drive, so that residents or people were just kind of walking or driving or biking down the corridor, they get the message about tonight's meeting. And we also worked with kind of local residents to kind of get email notices out about tonight's meeting. So we're hoping that we have a good turnout. I haven't looked on the ring set to see how many people are here, but we really hope that you understand the level of effort that we did and that people recognize that. So what did we do on Cuesta Drive? So we installed speed tables on Cuesta. Speed tables are roughly about 22 feet wide. And one of the main issues that I know there's a concern to residents is the height of the speed tables on Cuesta Drive. When we originally did the design and planning, we were aiming for speed tables that were going to be about 3.5 inches tall. And during the construction phase, we started out at that height and worked with some of the local residents to kind of get input on kind of how effective the tables were during the first phases of construction. And we found that they really weren't very effective. And so we did increase the height of the speed tables at a city staff level. And we ended up with about a 4.25 inch speed table height. And the reason for that is because we wanted to get high tables that would get motorists to slow down their vehicles to at about 15 miles per hour as they were moving over the speed tables. And after kind of trial and error in the first few tables, we ended up with a 4.25 height. We also installed speed humps along Arboleda Drive. Speed humps are about 12 inches wide. They're more kind of oval on the top versus the speed tables kind of have more of a flat top. And the speed humps are Arboleda were 12 feet wide. And we also installed various always stops along the corridor, specifically at Quest and Clark. That was actually put in just before the actual physical speed hump and speed table construction started. And we also installed a couple of always stops along Campbell Drive, or Campbell Avenue at Arboleda and Rosita. And lastly, we also installed a brand new pedestrian pathway along the north side of Cuesta Drive between Clark and Campbell to support the safe routes to school operations to Covington School off of Rosita Avenue off of Campbell. So here's a quick map of the corridor. There again, the corridor includes Cuesta between El Monte and Springer, Arboleda from Cuesta to Springer, and existing controls that were there before we did anything along the corridor include the traffic signal at El Monte and the two existing always stops along Cuesta at Campbell and Springer. What we did with the project was install the three additional always stops that we mentioned earlier at Clark and Cuesta, and along Campbell at Arboleda and Rosita. And there's some more work planned along Campbell Avenue as part of the upcoming 2021 summer street resurfacing work, which include the installation of crosswalks at Arboleda and Rosita Avenue. So here's where we installed speed tables, a total of 5 along Cuesta Drive. And what we're showing here is the approximate address of one of the homes that's adjacent to the speed tables or speed humps. And we did install a total of 7 speed humps along Arboleda. And so those are just the locations of the speed tables and speed humps. And here's a quick summary of kind of where we were on speed before and after with the project. And just as a reminder for the audience and for the commission, what we were aiming for was to get speeds along Cuesta Drive and along Arboleda Drive closer to 25 miles per hour. If you look here down Cuesta Drive, and hoping you guys can all see my cursor here, the pre-data is shown in the gray color. Here, for example, we were seeing speeds on Cuesta closer to 35 miles per hour. And there is no dedicated sidewalk facilities along Cuesta Drive. And so pedestrians having traffic kind of travel along the left or right of the pedestrian at 35 miles per hour does cause a discomforting experience for those pedestrians and for those bicyclists. And along Cuesta Drive towards the Springer side, we were similar at about 36 and 35 miles per hour. And so when you see two numbers together, I just want to quickly kind of help you understand what that means. It's eastbound and westbound. So we measured speeds in each direction of Cuesta Drive. So if you see two speeds, it's always east and west, or in the case of Clark, north and south. So that's what the two numbers mean as you're looking at them. So post-construction along Cuesta Drive, roughly as close as we could get to the old location, but where we put speed tables, we went for a location in the middle between speed humps or speed humps on Arboleda or speed tables on Cuesta. Sorry, all this tongue twisting. So what you see here post-construction is we were hitting about seeing cars get to about 28 miles per hour between speed tables on Cuesta Drive in the eastbound direction, and at about 25 miles per hour in the westbound direction, kind of on the west side of Cuesta. On the east side, closer to Springer, vehicle speeds were in the eastbound direction at about 26 and about 28 in the westbound direction. So we're a little over 25 miles per hour in some areas, but a lot lower than we were in the pre-construction phase. Along Arboleda Drive, this is the area kind of west of Campbell, we were seeing vehicle speeds at about 31 miles per hour eastbound going towards Cuesta, and eastbound going towards Springer, and westbound 28 going towards Cuesta. Out near Springer, vehicle speeds along Arboleda were at about 35 miles per hour, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of the residents in Arboleda kind of vocalized and organized themselves to help make sure that whatever traffic calming improvements were done on Cuesta, there was some accompanying treatment along Arboleda Drive. But in a post-construction phase, out kind of again near Cuesta, vehicle speeds dropped to about 23 miles per hour in the eastbound direction and 22 in the westbound. And on the other side, near the same data collection point we did before, speeds dropped to 25 miles per hour in the eastbound and 24 in the west. So a lot closer to what we were aiming for during the planning phase. And although we didn't have any pre-collection data on the portion of Arboleda closer to Campbell, we did do post-construction, and we had very similar consistent speeds between about 22 to 25 miles per hour. Now, those were the two areas where we focused to work with this project. But there was always a lot of interest from residents that lived outside of those two streets to make sure that we did data collections so that in case this project had any adverse effects to other streets like San Luis or Benvenue or Paco, that we could adjust our project to expand and help provide relief to those streets if there was an impact. Now, with COVID, there's a lot less traffic on the roadways as most residents have experienced, but vehicle speeds, we were under the assumption we're going to be about the same. If there was capacity, we wanted to see if vehicles were speeding up or slowing down on the roadway. And I'm going to start with San Luis. San Luis, closer to El Monte, was roughly 24 miles per hour eastbound and westbound, closer to El Monte, closer to Clark, about 26 miles per hour in the eastbound westbound direction. But with the project, we saw vehicle speeds drop down to about 24. Now, we didn't do any specific traffic calming treatments along San Luis Avenue, but definitely with the reduced traffic volumes on the roadway network because of COVID, we're also seeing a lot less vehicle speeds in some areas. So that's the case with San Luis. On Benvenue, where we were in a pre-COVID, pre-project condition, we had speeds closer to about 28 miles per hour eastbound and 30 westbound. We were seeing speeds at about 27 in the same area, but as motorists were approaching and getting closer to El Monte, we did see an uptick in vehicle speeds closer to the pre-project conditions. Along Paco, where we saw 29 mile per hour speeds in a pre-project condition, we did see vehicle speed reductions to about closer to 25 miles per hour. But on the other side of Paco, coming from Springer, we're still seeing where we had 31, 33 miles per hour eastbound and westbound, we're about 31 and 29. So a slight reduction in the westbound direction, but eastbound was pretty consistent. Clark Avenue, oops, give me 1 second there. Clark Avenue in a pre-project, which had about 29 or 30 miles per hour north and south, was pretty similar in a post-construction phase, 28, 29. So you see where we didn't do treatments, vehicle speeds are roughly in the same ballpark of where they were before. Same thing with, again, here, Campbell, we did see a little reduction, but we had 2 new always stops in this area between Arboleda and Rosita. So again, where we did traffic calming treatments, we saw a significant drop in vehicle speeds, which is what the goal of the project was. Everywhere else, we're luckily still seeing vehicle speeds that are either below or at around the same level of a pre-project condition. So not anything that would indicate we potentially need to do additional traffic calming at this time, but with all of the data collection we've done, we have a really good baseline to continue to monitor these neighborhoods as we move out of a COVID traffic condition in the coming year or two. Now, vehicle volumes, I'm showing on the map only for Cuesta and Arboleda, only because the map gets so busy like you saw in the previous diagram. So along Cuesta Drive, we're showing what is called average daily traffic. So that's the amount of vehicular traffic that travels on a roadway over a 24-hour period, typically on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So in a pre-project COVID condition, we were seeing vehicle volumes total over 9,000 vehicles per day on the portions of Cuesta between Campbell and El Monte, roughly 4,400 going west and 4,700 going east. And then the pre-project condition portion of Cuesta approaching Springer, we were again at about 4,400 vehicles going east, 4,600 vehicles going west, so around that 9,000 vehicles per day. But in COVID, we had a significant drop in vehicular volumes. In the same direction, at the same location, we dropped down from 4,400 to around 1,900 vehicles. So now we're at about 4,000 vehicles a day, over a 50% drop in vehicular volumes. I would not say that that is due to our traffic calming project, because we're not seeing an increase, significant increase, or any increase at all on the adjacent streets, which I'll show you shortly. That's strictly due to COVID. On our Arboleda Drive between Cuesta and Campbell, we had only a little over a few hundred vehicles per day, and we're closer to about 200 vehicles per day now. So again, also a drop. And on the other side here, where we were closer to about 500 vehicles a day, we're at about 200. So again, that dropped not due to this project, due to just traffic COVID conditions. And I do have data for all of the other streets that we showed you earlier where we saw speed changes, but we're showing that in the table format just because there's so many locations to show. But you see a common trend here. The change in average daily vehicular volumes significantly lower in a post-COVID, in a post-project and COVID condition versus 2019 data. So with that, that's the end of our data findings. And what we would recommend for the commission today is to review this data and allow for public comments, identify any adjustments that you feel may be appropriate based off of your own experiences or based off public input from residents tonight. And if you see fit, we would recommend that you recommend retention of the Cuesta Drive and Arboleda Drive traffic calming project to the City Council. And that's the end of my presentation, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jaime. I think what I'd like to do is open it up to questions, or I should say comments, comments from the public, and then bring it back to the commission for questions and feedback. I see 9 hands that are up, so I am actually going to give each speaker 2 minutes. That's 10 hands, I suppose, with Mr. Leonard too. So 2 minutes each, and I'd like to ask each speaker to also state the street of residence. Do you live on Cuesta or one of the neighboring streets, or do you live elsewhere and you use Cuesta for commuting? So I'm going to go first with Roberta. You were first to raise the hand, so I'm going to go with you. 2 minutes, please. And then do state your street of residence.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So because it's 2 minutes, I live on San Antonio Road. I use Cuesta to go, to the hospital, to go to my hairdresser, and for medical appointments down in the area. I had written to you, and I think that there are some engineering challenges. I don't think, number one is the signage, that I had great difficulty navigating, even though I knew that the humps were there. So I was recommending that the arrows on the ground, be painted yellow, or on the top of the tables that you have like yellow rectangles or something, so there's more visibility to the, as the speed bumps are coming up. I do feel really horrible for the gentleman who's handicapped, because I know I had a lot of difficulty, and I drive an SUV that's relatively new. So it was really a challenge for me, and I really, really hope that you will try to address some modifications. The second thing was that I have friends who have cars that have the batteries on the bottom because they're electric cars, and the cars are bottoming out. And that also is an engineering problem that I think, either needs to be shaved down or some. I'm not an engineer, but it really is very difficult to navigate those. I think that, we all want traffic calming. However, we don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. And I said, if you don't have cars driving safely, because I've had recommendations, try to turn the wheels of your car a little bit at an angle when you go over the hump, and that might be, prevent you from bouncing as much, and that seemed unsafe. And driving more to the side where the bicycle lanes are, and that seemed unsafe. So I'm really turning. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Kurosaki, can you please mute your phone or your line?
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
mute your line. Thank you.
okay.
If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand.
I'm trying to look for the hand thing.
Okay, don't worry. I think I have you recorded that you'd like to speak. When your turn comes, I'll let you know. But until then,
Okay,
please
thank
mute
you.
your line. Thank you. Next, WA. I don't have a name. I have just the 2 initials, WA.
Hi, this is Wendy. I am a Los Altos resident on University Avenue. We regularly use Cuesta for driving to medical appointments, tennis, anything, visit friends and around. Very concerned about the height of the speed bumps. I've seen near accidents, people slamming on brakes because they're so surprised they're so huge. Lots of damage to the speed bumps because cars are bottoming out. I have an electric Tesla. My battery is on the bottom. Continued beating is going to cause an electric fire. We've gone out and measured and taken pictures. They appear to be approximately 6 to 9.5 inches tall. I can hire a professional surveyor if you would like, and I'll submit it to the county or the city. And I also want to note that as per Santa Clara County Roads and Airports, which Los Altos is a part of Santa Clara County, I know you guys have your own information, but the maximum height is 3.5 inches or 3 inches. And also they have a lot of precautions for any roads that are used for primary emergency response routes for fire departments and others. I am very concerned because I've seen almost pedestrians getting hit now because of these speed bumps. People are trying to go around them, and my damage to my car and other cars and the near accident, I think this is causing way more damage to the community than what it was supposed to be. I would like to see these speed bumps shortened. I'd like to see an official height measurement from the roadway to the top of the bump. We measure it about 9 inches tall. And as an FYI, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. In order to safely go over these bumps, we're typically at 6 to 7 miles per hour, which means cars are slamming on their brakes. I just wanted to let the city know I'm speaking on behalf of not only myself, but many of our friends that could not unfortunately make the call tonight. And they have the same serious concerns that there's going to be a battery explosion because of the repeated damage from cars bottoming out on these large speed bumps. And we'd like to see that if they're lowered. I understand, and I agree with lowering this, doing measures to lower the speed along Cuesta Drive, but this is not the answer to it. And thankfully, we've had COVID traffic, so there's not been as many people.
Great. Thank you, Wendy.
Traffic resumes. Okay.
Thank you. Steve Taglier, you're next.
Hi. So I think you're going to hear a lot about the height of bumps. I definitely have followed traffic through. Oh, I'm sorry. I live on La Prenda, and I go downtown using Cuesta daily. So yeah, I think the height you'll hear a lot about, and I would tend to agree. I followed a city vehicle, one of your own trucks today, who came to a complete stop to go over the bumps every time he went across one. So I do think there's some height issues. The other thing I'd like to bring up is the intersection, the section between Campbell and South Clark that you put in, which I really appreciate the 2 stops. It's really done a lot to calm traffic. It'd be great if we could also somehow better delineate those bike lanes. I'm on the school board. We're trying to use that as a safe route to school. Kids will be using bikes through that area. The more we can make those bike lanes very obvious in that one section is all I'm looking for. Painted green or green striped, something to make it stick out. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next, we have Dana. Dina?
Yo, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You got 2 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Well, I'm Dina, and I live on Cuesta, and a table is right in front of my home. So I have 2 comments. One is the noise level is unbelievable. I don't think anybody is addressing that. I am hearing crash after crash after crash in front of. Not only can I hear it in my home, in my backyard, I've had over that thought that there was an accident out front. When a truck came over, it landed so hard that my home actually shook. So clearly, I think there's something needs to be addressed to the excessiveness of the height. And then the second question or concern that I have, a request that I put in, is to move. I have the 15-mile-an-hour sign right in front of my home. I've looked at all the signage on Cuesta, and it appears that with the exception of one other sign, all of the signs are being shared between them and their neighbor and not right in front of the home. So my request would be to move it slightly over, still within, much shorter than where it is down the street, and be equal with the other neighbor and sort of a shared nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Next, we have Mr. Schultz. Rainer Schultz.
Oh, yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You go ahead, please. You got 2 minutes.
Okay, I live at the intersection of Campbell and Cuesta. And of course, I've been involved in traffic calming with the city of Los Altos since about 1990. That's about 30 years. And I have some comments on the things that have been done. Number one, I would say the stop sign that was put in at Clark and Cuesta has been extremely successful. It has accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish. And I really like that particular stop sign. Now, as far as the stop sign at Cuesta and Campbell is concerned, there has been no change. We saw earlier speeds before and after the changes. I still see the same speeds, people running the stop sign. That hasn't changed any. I suggested that a speed hump be put in at the crosswalk, and I guess I was told that some people thought handicapped people wouldn't accommodate handicapped people, which is not believable because there are other of these signs on Springer, for example. So I'm still wondering what could be done about the people just running the stop sign, children crossing there all the time going to school. And maybe someone could make an extra effort in design to try to do something. I do have one little comment, has nothing to do with it, that aesthetically, some of these changes have not been really particularly great. I have 2 camphor trees in front of my house, big ones. The roots were chopped on these trees, and I was told that they would die. Anyway, that's just a side comment. I do have another comment on what people said earlier.
You're running out of time.
Okay. Very quick. I do drive an electric car. I have no problem running over these speed bumps. I drive my car between 15 and 20 miles an hour over these, and I don't hit bottom on them. So maybe the city of Los Altos could provide driving lessons or pay for driving lessons for these people that have problems. So thank you for your attention. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Next is Jill Woodford.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak tonight. And I just want to thank you for listening to all our citizen comments and for the past several years regarding this traffic calming project. I did want to point out one error on the data on the previous slides that were shown to us. The data for Benvenue between South Clark and Larita is incorrect. I just double checked the raw data sheet and the average speeds are actually higher than what was shown on the slide deck. Number one, the speed bumps in Mountain View are a joke. A guy passed us going over 50 miles an hour in the middle turn lane one day when we were coming home from Safeway. So I don't want to have those on our side of Cuesta. I think we need something kind of in between what we have now and what they have. People are parking in the no parking zone, and they're also not stopping at the stop signs at Campbell and Clark. I saw one car drive through both stop signs without even slowing down. So I just asked if the police could start enforcing at those stop signs. Also, the bumps are not a consistent height, and I do see people swerving into the bikes, like whatever is a bike space, even if it's not technically a bike lane. And so I'm not sure if there's something we could do to prevent the cars from swerving over to that side. Also, for the adjacent areas of Benvenue, Paco, and Giralda, which were already cut through streets in the past. We have cars going 30, 35 miles an hour in excess of 35 miles per hour. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have a bike lane. We walk in the traffic lane and we have these fast speeding cars. I did an analysis on a sheet and I will email the Streets Commission after the meeting. Most of the streets that are being considered in this area have 45% of the traffic they had in 2019. These streets have around 65%. Some areas are over 100% of the traffic that we had before. Now, the streets like Cuesta, South Clark, Campbell, they have an area for bicycles and they have a place for pedestrians to walk. We don't, and that's the reason we wrote the letter to council before this project went in. We can't really afford to have more cars speeding down our streets. It's not safe. So I would just like you, I will forward you all the letter that we sent, the petition we signed, and I would appreciate if you would really take that into consideration.
Thank you, Ms. McCurdy.
It's a complex situation. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Next is Jim Nivison. Sorry if I'm name. Jim?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. 2 minutes.
Okay, great.
State where you live or what street you live on.
I live on Cuesta Drive. My name's Jim Nivison. I live on Cuesta Drive and I have a speed table directly in front of my house. So I've had a chance to see pretty closely how they work. You know, in the past, before we did this, people drove too fast on Cuesta, not just a few people, but a lot of people. And since the project's gone in, it's much different. It's nice. People drive slower. You know, and I think that's due to two things. Part of it's the calming project, and part of it is we have pandemic traffic, which was already very low beforehand. I think maybe we've gone too far. Maybe made these too high. They seem like they're higher than 4.5 inches, but whatever height they are, they seem as though they are too high. The speed in front of my house, many people slow down to 5 miles per hour or less. And I think they need to, because many people go clink or scratch or whatnot. And that's happening all the time. I'm not sure what the intent was. You know, maybe it's 25 in other spots, but in other spots it's 5 miles per hour. And you have to remember that one of the problems on our street prior to all this was congestion during rush hour. And I wonder what the effect after the pandemic's over, these things will have on rush hour traffic on our street and the adjoining streets. So I guess my suggestion would be, look at the height. I think you've gone too far. We slowed down traffic too much. We have to remember that people need to get somewhere, and this is a through street with not a whole lot of alternatives. And let's get it slower than it was before, and that will be great, and we can do that. And before we make any final decisions about this, wait until traffic returns to previous levels and see how it works when the system's stressed, because it was stressed before. That's what I got to say.
Thank you, Jim. All right, next we have Mr. Suresh Babu.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. 2 minutes, please.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
you live on.
Suresh Babu, I live on Cuesta as well, 482, and it's a pleasure to actually talk about the Cuesta Calming project. A rare example of a project where community input has gone in to create and make the community safer. So it's gone through a lot of input, the ample choice for, ample opportunities for review, and it's made a big difference. As the data pointed out, we were suffering from, congestion, very high traffic volumes, people speeding at, almost 40 miles an hour. And the difference is really noticeable. And, there's safe paths for children. So overall, I mean, these are the types of projects that the city needs to proactively actually put into place. So let's actually replicate the initiative that we've done for Cuesta, and then take it to all the streets in Los Altos. Let's make the entire complete streets of Los Altos safer. So the whining that I've heard, generally the chatter on next door and other places, are from people who seem to think that they have the right to speed through a neighborhood at 40 miles an hour, who think that a few minutes spent extra slowing down somehow is an inordinate amount of delay in their life. People seem to have no concept of
Mr. Babu, your
life.
Time is up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Very well.
Yes,
Mr.
thank you
Leonard,
for the mailer that let me know that this was happening. I don't drive Cuesta regularly. I live on Berry down by the Rancho. But it seems like the city is using the wrong tools to slow down traffic. the streets should not punish a crowd for driving at the speed limit. And from my experience with ordinary cars that I drive, if I were to hit those bumps along Cuesta at 25, it would be quite a punishing blow, which is, so people are going to slow down, which gives brake dust in the neighborhood. Speed up after that is exhaust fumes. And it's just not safe to have that profile of bump. I'm a professional engineer, but not as a traffic engineer. But there have got to be industry standards or some standards for what is a proper speed bump, speed hump, speed table, whatever you want to call it, for a street which is expected to have 25-mile-an-hour speed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Leonard. Mr. Kurosaki, you're next.
Okay, thank you. My name is Howard Kurosaki, and I live on Cuesta Drive, and I'm actually, myself and a couple other people, petitioned the council to do something about calming Cuesta. Results are in, shows that it does work. Now, I'm not really in favor of the height of this, but it does work. The only issue I see right now is a lot of cars are veering into the pathways so they don't have to hit it. And that's dangerous because they're going into bike lanes and pathways. But I applaud the commission for what they've done so far. It's not that I'm really in favor, but it has slowed down, so it does work. That's all I can say. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kurosaki. I see a Wendy with a hand raised. Did you speak earlier, Wendy, or is that a different person? All right, I see the hand going down. So, Mr.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Did you,
okay.
Did you speak
No,
earlier?
that was a different Wendy called.
Got it. Okay, go ahead, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Wendy. I live near Los Altos Avenue. We have tutoring at the Kumon Center twice a week. We also have another tutor on the other side of Los Altos once a week. And I also go to grocery shopping at Ranch 99. So I do drive through that street quite a lot. As the earlier speaker says, I also have Tesla electric vehicle with battery at the bottom of the car. So, Mr. Jaime Rodriguez, he said the goal of the project is to achieve an average speed of 25 miles per hour. In order to do that, the city purposely designed the speed table so people will be driving at 15 miles per hour. That was what was presented earlier. By simple math, it tells me that the other parts of the road, people must be driving at 35 miles per hour in order to accomplish the goal of 25 miles of average speed. I cannot agree with Mr. Jaime's claim that this is working. The best way to achieve a 25 miles per hour is to have people drive 25 miles an hour all the way, not alternate between 35 and 15 miles per hour within a distance of 3 to 5 minutes. You can say that the speed table works. By the same token, we can also say, hey, let's plant a tree in the middle of the road. It will achieve the same result. However, is that a good solution? Absolutely not. The height of the speed table is not acceptable, and I respectfully ask you to reconsider making adjustment to the project to make Cuesta Drive both safe and pleasant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Next, we have Mr. Drew Hoffman.
Yeah, hi. I live on Raimundo and been in Los Altos for 35 years, and I use Cuesta to go to downtown quite often. And, you know, first time I saw I had a drive over the speed tables, it was really shocking. I mean, like most people, you know, I've driven all over the country, in Europe. I've never seen something quite like that anywhere. So it's a little jarring and unusual. And I think what everybody has been saying is that, look, we all want people to drive the speed limit for child safety, for everyone. It's the best intentions. But I think the approach has really bad unintended consequences, and that people have all been bringing up. So I think that Dan Cohen at the beginning of the session had some very good creative alternatives to get to the objective without having these huge speed tables that are just inordinately high and damage cars and have all these unintended consequences. So I'm all for 25 miles an hour, but I think we can get to that. safely in more practical ways.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Chang, Mr. Chang, Ms. Chang.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Chang. I live on Cuesta Drive. Hearing a lot of discussions, but I think this the method that we have put in place is working. There's a lot of requests to lower the height, but I'm sure the speed would go up, and that would not achieve the purpose of why we are putting these measures here. I also drive an electric car. I have a Tesla. I drive 15 miles as it, as the sign says. I have no issue. So for people who saying they have to slow down 5 miles per hour, can you do a check before I really don't understand why 5 miles has to be achieved just to go through that bump, because for me driving 15, I had no issue at all. So overall, I think this is working. And for someone who's asking for height reduction, please let us know how that would let the speed not go up, as that was the disaster of what we're experiencing. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you, Chang. Next, Anne. So I have Anne, I guess you're next.
Hi, this is Anne Marie Joel. I'm a resident of Cuesta. I, among others, were major proponents to instigate change for Cuesta, and I'd like to make a couple corrections. First, the residents have been personally attacked verbally based on discontent with the bumps, and I'd like to make it clear that the residents are 96% in favor of the solution when it went in, but 100% in favor of change. But we did not design these solutions. These solutions are dictated by laws and regulations beyond our reach. So we are all for the same change and the same safety and effectiveness we all want. So I wanted to make that clear. Second, somebody made a comment about space. The width of Cuesta doesn't even substantiate its use. There is no space for a designated bike lane, which there's some definition of designation versus delineation. Sorry, designated it is. Delineate, it cannot be delineated on Cuesta, meaning there cannot be a bike lane. There's no space. It's not wide enough. It's not even wide enough to carry the volumes we've got, let alone have a walkway, which we do not have. We established that walkway for the children as a cross over at South Clark and Campbell, but the rest of the roadway does not have a walkway. That's off-street parking apparently. So those two are corrections. As for the improvements, I do thank the commission and staff for the hard work that's gone in over the last 7 years. One benefit we've seen here, which has been instrumental to the safety of all, which is the removal of most semis off the street, traveling at 50 miles an hour, slamming on their brakes, vibrating our houses. Those are gone. And we cannot be more thankful for that. And whatever is done from this point forward, please do not sacrifice that benefit. That was a ticking time bomb, and we cannot have that come back. While I am attempting to see all sides of this, the most difficult point here is that the complaints I'm hearing is that people just don't want to slow down, and they want the speed tables lower so that they can continue to speed. And that is something we cannot let happen. Am I suggesting this is the best solution? I wouldn't know. This is not my purview. Am I suggesting it's convenient? It's not. Sometimes community and safety is not convenient. Is there a better solution? Maybe there is, but we cannot sacrifice the progress we made to get there. And that's one item I hope the commission takes seriously.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Your time, thank you. Andrew.
Hi, thanks for having me. I live on Cuesta. I've been on the street for about 10 years, but in the city since 1972. I guess, my point of view is if the goal was to really slow down traffic, it is working. I have 2 low riding sedans and have no issues. I also have 2 teenage drivers who haven't had any issues driving those 2 low riding sedans. So what I tell people as friends come over to our house or whatever, I say, look, if you're banging your car, you're just going too fast, period. And, you know, I haven't had any issues with it. The one thing I would kind of throw in there as a potential opportunity, though, is some more visual notification that this is a 15-mile-an-hour, you know, space, because there's the signs there, but I feel like people don't see it. So there might be an opportunity to add some paint color on the road or some other alert system. But I have no issues with it. It's much better than having cars fly down here. In the past, I had my car hit on the side of the road from people flying by. So I'm quite content with the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we have Deb.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you for letting me comment. I live on San Luis, and just a few comments. One, the stop signs at Clark and Cuesta are really helpful. I always had difficulty making that left turn when I was going on to Cuesta, and it's just made it a lot easier, and I think it's a lot safer for our kids. So I think that was really a big improvement. I would agree with other people who've talked about the signage for the speed tables. I know that it probably would be helpful, either clearer signs or some kind of street marking. I don't drive the street that often, and when I do, I actually sometimes forget, and then I think, oh no, a speed bump, you know, so I think if there was better signs, it would help. I do not mind slowing down for the speed tables. You know, I haven't had damage to my car. I do have to slow down significantly, and I don't mind doing that. What I have noticed, though, is I've had a few times where people have honked behind me. You know, I think it annoys the people behind me. And I wonder when the traffic is heavier, if there might be more of that. And I realize that that could be disruptive for the neighbors if that happens. No one else has mentioned it who's lived on Cuesta, but I know that I've had a couple people honk me. So the height seems a little bit high, as people have mentioned. It's also maybe I'm not sure if it's the height versus the angle, but I can see how it has slowed down traffic. So I do see the benefits, just maybe with a few improvements, it could be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deb. Next, we've got Jaya. Jaya? All right, I don't hear from Jaya, so we're gonna go to Kirk Page next. Kirk? All right, this is the last call, Jaya or Kirk? Okay, I'm going to assume that they're no longer wishing to speak. So with that, last call for anyone from the public who wishes to speak. Going once.
I got it.
Twice.
Hey, Jaya is speaking here.
Oh.
All right, Jaya, you got 2 minutes. Jaya, we cannot hear you. Jaya?
Yeah, hold on. Oh, gosh. Sorry, guys, some technical difficulties here.
Okay.
I'm Jaya. I live on Cuesta Drive.
Okay, Jaya, we lost you. All right. Okay, Kirk Page. Okay, Jaya, last call. All right, Jaya, when you have your technical difficulties resolved.
Reduced to 15 miles an hour, but it has truly made a significant difference for all.
Hear you.
Oh.
It kind of looks like Jai and Suresh's microphones are both.
Yeah, I mean, I see both of them being active, but it's not coming through. All right, so Jaya and Suresh, when you guys figure out your technical difficulties, please let us know. We'll patch you back in again. I'm going to bring it.
Nadeem, for our chair, I think there's someone else from the public who wants to speak, Mira C.
Yeah, I see her hand coming up, yes. All right, Mira, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks. Virtual hand wasn't working. So I live on Harrington,
And there's two things. There's the traffic, of course, and the stop signs. I know I've lived here for years and the stop signs have helped some, but my two main things with this is at night, people who aren't familiar with this area and have no warning, the signs are terrible. And you drive at a normal 25 miles an hour, your car will go flying over the bump if you aren't expecting to have to deaccelerate your brakes. And then also, on another note, because they're so high, I genuinely fear when ambulances or fire trucks need to go down the street, you can't go that fast, especially with the truck, or if there's somebody who's truly injured inside the ambulance. It would just be painful, and I don't even know if it would be possible. So I'm just wondering kind of if that's been something that's been considered. But besides that, I wouldn't consider the ones who are against it exactly as whiners, considering my dad's the one, Dan Cohen, who has the medical issue, and that's a serious thing he's had for a few years. And that's it.
Thank you, Myra. Great. Last call for Jaya. Okay, so with that, let's bring it back.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, this is Jaya.
Okay, Jaya, you got 2 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Jaya. I'm a resident of Cuesta Drive. I've lived here for a number of years. I, along with a few others on the street, was one of the proponents to make this change happen on the street. So I know a lot of hard work has gone in here, and the city and the commission and the city staff have made this project happen. I know it has made all of us safe, our children are safe, and it has slowed down the traffic on the street to the speed limit. I know there are some complainers here thinking that saying that the speed bumps are too high, but before the speed bump, the traffic was just, the speeds were just uncontrollable, but now it's come to a point that we can really live on this street, and it has truly made a significant difference. I just wanted to thank everybody for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaya. So first, let me actually thank all the members of the public for providing your input. There are no whiners, no complainers. We welcome all the inputs. So for this commission to be able to really calibrate where the balance resides and how best to serve the community. So with that, I'm going to actually bring it back to the commission. This ends the portion of the input from the public, and then have the commission ask questions and deliberate simultaneously. So who would like to go first? And Gaku, if you please turn off the cameras for all the members of the public who are not on the commission, or at least not commissioners. Thank you. All right, who wants to go first in the commission? All right, Vice Chair, go for it.
I always go if there's no other volunteers. So I think I have one question and then lots of quick bullet points that I can make. So Jaime, the question for you is a two-part question. What would be the impact, in your professional opinion, if we bring these back to standard specification, which I understand is 3.5-inch height, part A. And then part B is, since you've made the current changes and we've seen all your speed data, has PD been able to enforce speeds on Cuesta, which they hadn't been able to do in the past? And if we bring it back down to 3.5 inches, the standard, do you think they'll be able to enforce posted speed in the future? That's my question.
Sure, thanks for that. So on the first part, I think that if we were to remove and reduce the height of the speed tables along Cuesta, I haven't heard too much concern regarding the height of the speed humps on Arboleda. So ignoring those and focusing on Cuesta Drive, I definitely believe that if we were to reduce the speed, we would see much higher vehicle speeds. We started at 3.5 when the speed tables were first built, and vehicles were actually traveling over the speed tables at around 25 miles per hour. So in between humps, in between tables, the speeds would be higher. There was a comment from one of the residents that spoke today that we were seeking average speeds. Where we placed our counters for the post-construction were centered between tables in the field. So those are the max heights. And so if we were getting about 25 miles an hour at the mid-block point, we were actually getting closer to an average of about 20 to 22 miles. You know, if you kind of drop down to 15, it can drive back up to about 25. We're at about 20, 22 miles per hour as an average, which is one of the goals that we set when we were in the planning phases. That's what we wanted to do, get at that 20, 22, but hopefully no higher than 25. And we are seeing some speeds higher than 25 as motorists travel between locations. So if we were to reduce that, we would definitely see an increase in vehicle speeds. And the only real way I think that we could address that issue is to have more speed tables on Cuesta. So we have 5 today. So if we reduce, the only thing that would be a mitigation to that would likely be adding more speed tables, but we wouldn't be seeing the reduced speeds that we're recognizing today through the current height.
Yeah, so sorry, just let me follow up. And I know you can't be precise, but any approximation of how much you think the speed would go up if we went to 3.5 inches in height, A, and B, if you were talking about more tables to keep the posted speed limit, how many more are you talking about? Because there's quite a few there now.
So again, there are 5 that were built along, 5 speed tables built along Cuesta Drive between Springer and El Monte. So based off of the speed tests that we did during the construction phase, where we were getting vehicle speeds of about 25 miles an hour over the humps, over the tables while we were building them, I'd expect to see an average speed on the roadway at closer to about 30 miles per hour. If we only were to reduce the height and not add or change the spacing of the tables that are already deployed. If we were to reduce and add more tables, I think we probably need close to 3 more. Right now, we don't have any tables, for example, between Clark and Campbell. And that's because the distance is relatively short, and that's bound by 2 always stops. So we maybe would want to look at introducing 1 there, and then potentially 1 more on each side of that area. You know, 1 more between Campbell and El Monte, and potentially 1 more between Clark and Springer.
Okay, thank you. So I promised some comments in bullet point format after my questions. So to go through my comments, I do think that the speed tables are a little bit high. I'm concerned for the experience of the driver, and I'm also concerned for ADA issues or any medical issues that have been raised, as well as emergency vehicles. So I would generally be in favor of looking at lowering the height some. At the same time, I hesitate to add more obstacles on our roadway, but I do think it was important. The reason these are there in the first place is because people were not following the posted speed limit. And I think it's essential for the neighborhood, for the city's service to that neighborhood to make sure the posted speed limit is followed. So I think that we should explore what the right formula is and what the input from the nearby residents is in helping keep that formula. But I do think the current ones are a little bit high. And I've driven straight down Cuesta at 25 miles an hour in a consistent pace, going over the bumps, and at 28 miles an hour. But I do think that they are a little bit high. And I didn't slow up and down. I just kept consistent pace. I already mentioned ADA issues. I also think it should be reviewed with the fire department and police department and get their input on what you have there today, and you know what kind of changes that they think would help. I think it'd be good to get more update from the police department on their ability to enforce speed limits there, because I think that was a goal of the project. And some of the residents also talked about people running stop signs and parking in the no parking area. So if we could pass that feedback on to PD as well, and whatever they can do for education and enforcement would be great. I do agree with the people who've requested more advanced warning of the bumps, whether that be signs or whether that be roadway pavement. I think that's a pretty good idea. And certainly permanent warning. I don't know if there's anything we do temporarily as well. I know when there was a raised crosswalk added in my neighborhood, everybody went over it for a few months at pretty fast speed and took some dips. But once you get used to it, that kind of, you know, people are more used to it. So permanent warnings, and if you need to do temporary ones, you know, that could be considered too. I think we should continue to evaluate this project, certainly again in the fall, when school is more open and perhaps work sites open up more, to see what the speeds and volumes are. And then certainly if we make changes to the project along the way. I would like to request that to the streets that we're evaluating, I'd like to add Covington to the list. Because coming up from Mountain View, you can turn on Grant Road, you can turn right onto Cuesta, or you can just go up a little farther and turn right onto Covington. So I'd like to get Covington and I think you took maybe some Covington data for a different project before, but as part of this project, I think we should look at Covington. What else do I have? A couple more. I have one point I'm missing.
To be expeditious.
Yeah, expeditiously. At Arboleda, the corner of Arboleda and Springer, I think there's some visibility issues with landscaping and trees that it's kind of hard to see to turn. I don't know if that's in the scope or out of scope. And certainly the same point about bicycles entering Cuesta from the Springer intersection, like maybe some sharrows or something, because there's really no space for them in that initial so many feet. Safe routes to school has been raised, and I'm a strong supporter of safe routes to school. So I know we had someone from Steve from our school board here, but as we're working on the master plan and the school route maps, let's make sure we get the feedback from the school districts that on their specific needs. And the other big concern I wanted to raise is when we hear about people on Cuesta driving around the bumps to avoid them and go into the shoulder where, you know, we have bicycles and pedestrians because we don't have sidewalks and bike lanes. When you look at the new formula, let's take that into account too, because I don't want drivers going around them and going where the bikes and pedestrians are. And I think the final one that I'll just call out is we did hear from one of the residents tonight who had a request about where the location of one of the 15-mile-an-hour speed signs. If you could just check in with them on that, that would be great. So thank you for taking my feedback.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Other commissioners for questions and feedback to the city. Tom.
So I like all the comments. There was a lot of good information there. Jaime said the normal height is 3.5 inches. Do you know what the max height is for, I mean, I'm sure there's a California or legal limit, like whether it's 9 inches or 12 inches or what. I assume we're way below whatever that maximum is.
So the typical average height is about 3.5 inches. I've seen them as high as about 4.5 inches. So we're just below that max height that I've seen. I'm not aware of a rule or that says that they need to be a maximum height of 4.5 or 6 inches. Again, the height that we built in the field was based off of a trial and error with the contractor and driving and making field observations on vehicle species they were traveling over the humps or the tables during construction.
So in theory, you could raise it up to 9 inches.
Well, within reason. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Probably wouldn't have
Yeah,
gone
well, one
higher
lady
than
said
4.5. Yeah.
One lady said that they measured them at 9 inches. So I was kind of like, you know, I'm assuming that they actually are at more like a 4 to 6 inch height when I've driven it anyway too. Also, is there, I don't know that you would know this, but is there a vehicle height minimum for vehicles when they produce them, whether it's a Tesla or a Ford or Chevy, that, you know, is the state law? I mean, I know that people can lower their cars and there are problems there, but that's not delivered out of the factory. And I don't know that you could answer that or not, but the other question Stacy mentioned was, or concern was, going into the shoulder or the bike path. Can we actually take those these speed humps and widen them into the shoulder so that people won't be going around them, because that's, you know, not the right thing for people to be doing either. And then, go ahead.
I thought it was a question, so I was going to answer, but
yeah,
you can keep on talking if you want.
No, it was a question. I just didn't know if you had the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah. So for the width of the humps versus the tables, on Arboleda, we basically went from edge to edge of pavement. But on Cuesta Drive, given that there are not formal bike lanes, but we try to accommodate width on the shoulders from the edge of pavement towards people's properties, you know, for bicycle activity. We purposely avoided trying to go too far into the that bike space, pedestrian space, just so the bicyclists wouldn't have to travel too far over the humps themselves at the max height. But the humps, the tables today on Cuesta do transition themselves kind of through a portion of that area beyond the edge of pavement towards the private properties. So we didn't go all the way where pavement exists.
Would that be an idea to extend them all the way to prevent people from, because you can't have a police officer sitting there 24/7 to watch for people going around them either.
I honestly would not recommend that, Commissioner. So we cannot, and we're not trying to solve and address every single motorist with these engineering solutions. You know, they're within a certain reason of application and expectation. And so, you know, I think for drainage, for bikeability and walkability, I think the limits that we built to along Cuesta are appropriate. And you know, if we went all the way, there's always going to be that person that tries to go into maybe someone's gravel area, you know, where they would normally park their car. That would be an unreasonable and really change the looking character even further of the roadway. So I would strongly recommend against that type of an approach.
Okay. For people following too close and locking the brakes, you know, there are California laws for following too close. If you rear end somebody, you are following too close and going too fast. Although, on the other side of that, I agree with you. When I've driven that, I believe the signs are too close to where the actual speed hump is. And I think moving them farther out to give drivers notice that they are there, or some other kind of visibility to that, that they're coming up on it, would help alleviate that. I thought they were too close when I drove it. As you come up to it, there's not enough notice to slow down if you don't see it. And that was all the points I had there. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schneider. Commissioner Katz, you're next. And unmute, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought that there was a wide spectrum of comments, and I would really appreciate all the people that took the time to participate on both sides of the issue. So, citizens of Los Altos, thank you for getting involved. I drive Cuesta fairly frequently, and my experience has been that until I got used to the speed bumps, the signage wasn't sufficient for me to recognize the first one until I hit it going too fast, meaning 25 miles an hour. And it is jarring at 25 miles an hour. But once you slow down to 15, it's not. And But I do have one question for Jaime, which is, can you verify that the 5 speed tables are 4¼ inches consistently, and that there aren't any anomalies there?
Thank you, Commissioner. And if I could just comment a couple of times. I just want to, before I answer that question, I want to address the issue of signage. So every speed table on Cuesta and every speed hump on Arboleda has 2 signs that note the speed hump and an advisory 15 mph speed over it. 1 sign in each direction of the hump on each side of the hump. And in addition to the signs that are there, we also have speed humps ahead with advisory speed, and we also have on the ground pavement stencils that say humps ahead. And so we definitely tried our best to advise people that those devices are on the roadway. And so I don't have too much to say regarding people not seeing them. They're very, very well signed, and we tried to balance the application of the signage with signed life for the neighborhood as well. But every speed table and every speed hump is clearly marked. We felt it was important to make sure that the signs are immediately adjacent to and not before or after the humps. That would be a typical sign application standard. So I just wanted to make sure that I provided a response to that, because it's a comment that came up a couple of times with both residents and the commissioners. Regarding your question of consistent height, yes, when we built them, we were there with the contractor. We made sure that they were deploying the asphalt at a very consistent height. We measured them consistently during the construction phase and made sure that they were compacted to get to that no more than 4¼ inch height. I would say in most areas it might be a little bit lower than that, 4¼ but 4¼ was the height that we built to.
Thank you, Jaime. The only comment that I would make is that if a driver doesn't drive it often, he may miss a sign on the side of the road. And I don't know what your experience is, Jaime, about actually painting the 15 mph recommended speed on the roadway itself some distance in advance of the speed table, so that if somebody misses the sign on the side of the road, it's right in front of them. That will be picked up either in daylight or by their headlights.
We could definitely look at that as an option. There is already a lot of information on the ground and on the signs regarding kind of the advisory speed. One of the comments that several people have made through email comments and a couple tonight that I actually really like, that I would say would be a good accommodation with this project, would be to add, right now we have like a chevron arrow as you're driving over the hump, but we don't have one kind of on the other side to let you know that the path that vehicles are driving down on the other side of the hump or the table. And that might be a really good addition. On the humps on Arboleda, we have also a little kind of diamond in the middle. We didn't put those in on Cuesta Drive, but we could definitely look into putting that in to try and give them a little bit more visibility. So those are options that I think if the commission is interested in seeing some near-term corrections, that would definitely one that I would be supportive of. And potentially something that we could do with the resurfacing program coming up this summer.
Thank you. Those were my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Yank.
Hi. You covered a lot of the questions already. I have one more, Jaime. There were some comments on just the strategy of how we're achieving the average speed. Can you just comment on what's the standard practice of how I guess transportation professionals would go about achieving an average speed? What's the normal approach that's taken?
So, well, typically when we're measuring kind of speed of a roadway, we're doing some type of a speed survey type of analysis, where we're looking at what's called 85th percentile vehicle speeds, and that's what we collected at in between tables on Cuesta and in between humps on Arboleda. And so we knew from our own kind of field observations and our own experience during the construction, post-construction driving over the humps, you really do need to slow down to 15 miles per hour. Sure, people slow down more, and that's okay, you know, but the 15 miles per hour is the speed that, you know, if you slow down as you approach the humps at that speed, you can drive over the speed tables fairly comfortably. And the higher end speeds that we were noting in the diagrams we provided were kind of around that, anywhere from 25 to kind of 28 miles per hour. So just averaging between that 15 to kind of, again, 25 miles per hour, it's kind of, or 28 miles per hour. That's how we're getting to what I was saying was about a 22 mile per hour average speed of the corridor. And that's with decreases as people are approaching the tables, increases as they're kind of traveling between, and it's basically just a sine wave, and we're just kind of drawing a line down the middle to kind of reach an average. And that's typically the application people use in an engineering practice to figure out what's the average speed that we're seeing as a result of the tables. And I've done lots of projects like these in other communities. I think I deployed 3 or 4 when I was working in the city of Palo Alto years ago. And you know, we're seeing much lower speeds on Cuesta than I've seen on other projects that I've worked on, because we did go a little bit higher on the tables. The other thing that I think that impacts the tables themselves is that we really work with the contractor to make sure that the tables themselves were really defined. When we first built them, the first couple with the contractor, they were all kind of more like large mounds, you know, and they didn't have that defined flat top that we were looking for. So part of what kind of provides that jarring effect that people are experiencing is that you're driving up and then you're kind of going down, so you're coming up, and then you're kind of hitting this kind of flat portion. That's kind of what also creates the jarring effect. I know you weren't asking, but another alternative, you know, to lessen the effect of the jarring can be just to make the wing wider, you know, and that's another option. That's something that we could experiment with. It would ultimately reduce the effectiveness of the tables as well, but you know, to what degree it would be an experiment of through constructability of the modifications.
Cool, thank you. That was helpful, and helpful for people to hear also that, like, it's not a standard approach to have people go a consistent speed down the street, because that is what the speed limit is trying to achieve, and we're clearly here because that wasn't helpful, or that wasn't the case. So my comments would be, we're kind of in this place where it's doing what we're designed to do, but there's still some valid concerns, I think, around you know, the accessibility, the safety, and the extreme behaviors that it kind of encourages for the people who really don't like the speed tables and are doing things to try to get around them. So I tend to agree with Stacy that if there's any way that we can reduce the impact of these, we'll sacrifice like probably a couple miles per hour, but we also reduce some of the extreme behaviors and make it overall more of a inclusive experience, I guess, going over these speed humps. I think it would be okay to give up the couple of miles per hour increase, I guess. What I do want to be conscious of, and what I think if we were to come up with options, how much would that cost us to do these different options, to either, you know, reduce the impact of the existing height, or if we were to reduce the height of the hump itself, or if we needed to add additional humps, like how much budget would we need to allocate for that? If we don't do any changes to the actual humps themselves, I do agree with a lot of the comments around trying to emphasize the visual cues. It sounds like, and we don't have visuals of it here, but it sounds like we've tried to make it visible, but I'm not sure if it's because people are going too fast that they're missing the visual cues. But if there's, as you called out, if there's some suggestions that make sense that we could additionally try, that sounds like a good idea. And also, if they're not already visible in the evening, we should try to make it more visible at night. That's all I got.
Great. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you all for the great comments. Jaime, just a few questions and then a few thoughts here. I think you've probably heard enough from my colleagues here. So let me understand, I'm not trying to be an engineer here, but just to understand the process by which you and the contractors converged to the 4¼ inches. So you tried 3½ inches, you measured the speed on the road, and it came in at 25 miles an hour or more, and you iterate on that height and then found that 4¼ inches was the height at which you could contain the speed down to about 15 miles an hour over the table. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. And we did do an iteration between the 3½ and the 4¼. You know, because when they laid the asphalt, you know, if they put down an inch, it isn't an inch in height that's gained. You know, because when they compact it, you know, you end up with about half of the height. Right. And so, yeah, it was definitely through experimentation that we achieved kind of that binding of 4¼ inches.
Yeah, so it was not an arbitrary decision. It was actually a methodical way to get to the number that you thought would reduce the speed to 15 miles an hour. And I want to note that the difference between the 3½ and the 4¼ inches is about what, 3/4 inches? I figured that would be what, 2 fingers worth? And that was enough to swing the speed by what, 10 miles an hour?
It depends on the thickness of your fingers, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have very thick fingers. Look, I think my quick observation here is that, and I don't want to dismiss the height question. I think it's a very valid concern. But I don't think I've heard yet from anyone the issue of surprise. In other words, we're all used to see table speeds and humps and throughout the county, different cities and mountain views, and everyone seems to have a different height. So instinctively, we have a certain expectation when we see a sign that says, oh, table speed ahead or hump ahead, we perhaps assume that it's of a certain height instinctively because we've driven over the one in Mountain View or some other place, and therefore we think that, hey, 25 miles an hour is probably okay, even though the speed sign says 15, we're inclined to ignore it. But clearly this is not the case, because if you do ignore it, you're going to feel it. And maybe it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we tell the drivers, do not ignore that speed sign because you will pay for it. And maybe we need to be very clear about that. That's the signage, and that can come in different ways, perhaps additional signage on a post before the hump, before the table, or perhaps literally just write down 15 miles an hour on the pavement. So people sort of say, I gotta slow down. I think folks who have felt that pain, I'm betting that the next time they drive over it, they're gonna go 15 miles an hour, because I did the first time I went over it at 25 miles an hour. It was not fun. But every subsequent time I went over it, I was definitely going 15 miles an hour. And I did not hit my bottom, by the way. So that was clearly that 15 miles an hour did work. So I want to encourage you to sort of try these things before we go and shave off, a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch and try experimenting again, to sort of see if we can train those drivers to be more observant of the road conditions. Nothing in the rules of the road says that if the speed limit is X, you have a God-given right to drive at X. Right? If you're driving Highway 17 and the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, and you take one of those turns at 55 miles an hour, you're going to probably end up in the ravine. And so you have to be careful of the road conditions and the obstacles and observe the signs. So I think in this case, if the sign says 15 miles an hour, we need to assert to the drivers and train them hard to observe those speed limits, at least at the 15 miles an hour over the table. So that's my first recommendation, along with the signage, of course. The second one, which was a bit surprising, and I think we heard maybe 1 or 2 members of the public talk about it, but the vast majority was tied to the height of the speed table. I don't think we heard much about traffic being diverted to adjacent streets. When we looked into design of this Cuesta project over the past many years, the number one concern that we heard from the public was, hey, if you put those speed tables on Cuesta, they're going to go all around Cuesta. And yet, for a number of factors, and certainly the pandemic plays a big factor here, we don't seem to, the data is not suggesting that we see that. Plus, I don't think we've heard any concern. So I don't want this to somehow disappear from our radar screen, just because we haven't heard anything about it yet. So I want to encourage the city to keep monitoring the traffic pattern, especially as the pandemic, hopefully the pandemic would slowly vanish and then traffic picks up again. And therefore we're going to start seeing that street being stressed again and observe what happens. Are we indeed training the drivers to observe at 15 miles an hour? And second, do we see any spillover effects to the adjacent streets? So these are my, my two big observations. My quick sense here is I don't think, I would personally would not recommend to make any changes until at least the pandemic is over and we've had sufficiently more time to observe the changing behavior of drivers and the traffic patterns, at which point we can come back and decide whether we should make changes to the street. So with that, I think I'm going to end this section, which is 40 minutes behind schedule, but I think it was well worth the discussion. I'm going to offer to take a 5-minute break. Meanwhile, perhaps Jaime, you could contact Suresh and tell him that he can join us again.
Will do, thank you. And based off your comments, Chair, we will take a hold approach for now on Cuesta Drive. We'll wait maybe until the fall when there's more data analysis. If there is an opportunity to try and do an experimental adjustment over the summer during the street resurfacing program, we'll look at that as an internal city staff discussion and provide any update at a future commission meeting.
To the extent that we can add a few more signs, they're fairly easy to add. Hopefully they're fairly easy to add to just instruct the drivers to really slow down. That'd be great.
Will do, no problem. Thank you much. And
Thank you. Let's take a
Suresh.
5-minute break and we'll reconvene at 7:46 p.m. All right, let's see if we can reconvene. Let's see if commissioners can turn their cameras back on. Okay, Tom and Steve, if you're back, can you please turn your cameras on? And Suresh, did you connect with Suresh Jaime?
Yes, I did. I sent him a text message, Rebecca.
Great, thank you. Steve and Tom and Suresh, if you could turn your cameras on. All right, we need one more at least to have quorum. Okay, now we do. Perfect. All right, Suresh and Tom, please turn your cameras on. Now we are back in commission mode. So we move to item number 4. We are 45 minutes behind schedule. Let's see if we can be efficient. El Camino Real, back to you, Jaime.
Just testing, can you guys see my presentation?
We can.
Great, thank you. So tonight, commissioners, we're going to introduce a new item to you. Specifically, we're going to be talking to you about the opportunity to install bike lanes along El Camino Real. This is not meant to be an item that you take any action on tonight. It's meant to be kind of a first introduction to this discussion topic. And I'll walk you through the presentation now. So as a quick background as to why we're here tonight, we were contacted by Caltrans last year. Caltrans owns and operates El Camino Real through a majority of the Bay Area from San Francisco all the way down to San Jose, and actually even into portions of the South Bay near Gilroy. And they are going to be street resurfacing the portion of El Camino Real starting at the Palo Alto Menlo Park border up near Stanford Shopping Center, all the way down to the Highway 237 intersection in Mountain View. So that's a super long stretch of El Camino Real. And the portion of that resurfacing project that's of interest to the city is the portion of El Camino Real between on the north end, Adobe Creek, which is the limit with Los Altos and Palo Alto, down to just south of Rankstorth Avenue, which is the city limits interest with Los Altos and the city of Mountain View. So initially when Caltrans contacted us about this project, they asked us to provide to them the city's kind of wish list as to how to restripe the lane lines on El Camino Real, not to install bike lanes, but to accommodate future bike lanes that the local agencies within that portion of overall work from Stanford Shopping Center at Menlo Park down to 237 could deploy on their own later. What ended up happening really at the start of 2021 is that Caltrans got a grant that they applied for, and they informed us that if there is any interest by any of the local agencies in that area, Palo Alto, Los Altos, or Menlo Park, if there's any interest to actually install the bike lanes, their grant would actually pay for the installation of the bike lanes as part of the resurfacing project. So that put us on an accelerated path to look at what opportunities are there to consider bike lane installation on El Camino Real. So what we're here to do tonight is to start that first discussion with you to determine, is it an option of interest for Los Altos at a policy supporting level, starting with the commission and ultimately with the city council, to install bike lanes in the portion of El Camino Real within the city's limits, which includes, again, from Adobe Creek at the north end down to just south of Rankstorth Avenue on the southern end. We did, to help you prepare some kind of initial thoughts, we did do a parking study internally at the city. My firm led that initial data collection effort and did the preliminary data analysis that's included in the staff report for your project. So here's just a quick visual. The project limits of interest for Los Altos include the portions of El Camino Real from Adobe Creek up to the north end, down to just south of Rengstorth Avenue. One thing I do want to point out that actually has come up as part of us doing this project is initially when we started, we had always been under the assumption that the curb operations, and I'm going to call El Camino Real a north-south street, okay, just so we're on the same page. So the west side of El Camino is Los Altos, and the east side of El Camino is really Mountain View, just to kind of put that in perspective for people. When we started this project out, and even when we were in discussions with Caltrans in 2020, we had always been under the assumption that the operations of the curbs and what really, and who dictates striping operations to Caltrans was, you know, the west side, Los Altos, and everything on the east side, Mountain View. It turns out that as part of us researching this project, we were in error there. The city of Los Altos city limit line between Los Altos and Mountain View is not the central line of El Camino. The city limits is actually the east curb of El Camino Real. You know, so that means that the entire width of El Camino Real, both directions of El Camino Real, northbound and southbound, really fall within the jurisdiction of the city of Los Altos. Now remember, Caltrans owns and operates the roadway. They ultimately have the final say on how the roadway is striped. But Caltrans takes a lot of weight and interest on what each jurisdiction would like to see as part of roadway stripings, you know, when they do a project. So while I think we may have a common goal with Mountain View in the long term to see some type of bicycle facility along El Camino Real, at least within this portion between Adobe Creek to city limits, it's really Los Altos's and Caltrans say, not the city of Mountain View. I just want to make sure that really, that's something really clear. There may be a land use interest from the city of Mountain View because the private properties are within the limits of Mountain View, but the curb operations are within the city of Los Altos. And we did confirm that the city of Los Altos provides street sweeping operations on both sides of El Camino Real through these limits. So it's definitely not that we're trying to muscle our way kind of to dictate what happens, but it's really important that we understand that because, you know, we do have that jurisdictional boundary. Our interest is the interest that should dictate to Caltrans what we want to see on El Camino Real. And we're still going to go through the process of verifying that kind of right away through a potential survey. And we've asked both Caltrans and Mountain View to provide any information that they may have to the latter, but everything we've seen so far, including information from Caltrans, does say that the right-of-way interest on both sides of El Camino Real, from Adobe Creek to just south of Rengstorth, is fully within the interests of the city of Los Altos. Okay, so when we are talking about potential future bicycle facility operations along El Camino Real, we have to first understand kind of what the city has always envisioned. The 2012 Los Altos Bicycle Transportation Plan is actually mute on what future bicycle facility operations the city wanted to see along El Camino Real. This is the bicycle network map from the 2012 bicycle plan. And you can see here, there is no formal designation on what the city was expecting to have, meaning would it have some type of a bike lane facility, would it have any other type of a facility at all. And I think part of that reason why is because there was just probably no expectation that there was going to be a change anytime in the near term. Well, lo and behold, here we are, we have an opportunity. As part of the the active Complete Streets Master Plan, we are updating our bicycle and pedestrian and merging it with our pedestrian plan. And, you know, these are the types of facilities that we're going to be presenting to the community and the commission and the council for consideration for future bicycle facilities in Los Altos. And I just wanted to quickly define what those typically are for residents and for yourselves. So, you know, class 1 facilities are typically, you know, off-road, multi-use pathways shared between bikes and peds. Think of it as a trail, you know, that you may walk along, you know, that has no vehicular traffic on it. A class 2 bike lane, which most of us are used to kind of riding along on a roadway in streets like Los Altos, like for example, San Antonio Road, is just a striped bike lane, a single 6-inch white line that delineates a space for bicycles to travel on. A class 3 facility is typically a bike route. It's a facility that we share the road with motorists, and that can be within the same lane or some other space on the roadway. And we do things like the use of greenback sharrows in the image here that delineate kind of that shared use bike route space. What's really new since the development of the 2012 bike plan as a standard facility is what's called a class 4 protected bikeway. And protected bikeways include a delineated space using striping, but typically with some type of a width buffer. Remember, class 1 is typically a single 6 to 8 inch stripe, typically 6 inches, but a class 4 facility introduces some type of a buffer width, usually minimum preferred about 3 feet, but we put them in as low as 30 inches. That's kind of the lower end of a width, 24 inches to 30 inches. But they can be as wide as 5 to 6 feet, and I've seen some cities do that as well. There isn't anything that says there's a maximum width of the buffer, but 3 feet is usually kind of the desired width. 24 inches would probably be the absolute minimum width. And what we're likely going to be recommending as a staff level is in partnership with the development of the Complete Use Master Plan with ALTA, is to actually recommend El Camino Real as a class 4 facility, but at least initially without any vertical elements within the buffered space. So it would be kind of a merge somewhere in the middle between a bike lane of a class 2 versus a class 4, because typically in a class 4 you'd have something in the buffered space to provide an additional vertical element. That's not what we're going to be recommending to you to consider with a bike facility on El Camino Real at this time, but we'd love to get your feedback on that thought. So just a few quick images here. This is El Camino on the left, looking south towards Los Altos Avenue. So shortly after you've crossed the Adobe Creek city limits with Palo Alto, you see the hotel on the right side there. All of El Camino Real is a 6-lane roadway, 3 lanes in each direction. The second image is as you approach San Antonio Road, and the main difference there between the two is that a lot of portions of El Camino Real don't actually allow parking. A lot of it is actually no parking. And on the left, there is some parking because of the hotel use on the right. But as you approach closer to El Camino, San Antonio Road on both sides, there actually is no existing parking. In this next slide, this is El Camino Real near the recently constructed kind of Copa Cafe development on the Los Altos side. So this is kind of looking back up towards Sherwood, back towards San Antonio Road. And even there, Los Altos has been planning very limited parking uses along El Camino Real as newer development has been coming in. And the last image here is the last image looking south towards Ortega Rexdorf Avenue with allowable parking uses, but very limited actual parking use on the roadway itself. So what we ended up doing to help prepare for today's meeting and to kind of give you guys some information to think over is we did what are called traditional parking turnover counts. We counted El Camino Real at several times of the day, and we basically just counted how many cars were parked on the roadway. And before that, we went out and measured the full length with the wheel, rolled out any existing red curb or no parking restriction areas to figure out, well, how many actual parking spaces are there on the roadway? How many people could park if the roadway was fully parked? And then we did the occupancy counts to determine what's the percentage of cars parked on the roadway. And we did it for both sides of El Camino, our side and the Mountain View side. And we did it for all of the side streets that tee into El Camino Real and went out at least about 2 blocks on each street. So for example, on Los Altos Avenue, we went westward into Los Altos a couple of blocks to figure out how many cars are parked on the roadway. We did it for Jordan, we did it for Distal Circle, Distal Drive as an example. And on the Mountain View side, we did it for like Del Medio and Rengstorff and other streets. And we did it on 3 weekdays to determine an average typical weekday. And we did it once on a Saturday and once on a Sunday to figure out an average weekend demand. And that's what's shown in these graphics here that were in your report packet for today. So as I mentioned, we measured the roadway to figure out how many parking spaces are there. Well, there's roughly 248 available on-street parking spaces total on this section of El Camino between Adobe Creek, down to just south of Ranksdorf Avenue, the city limits with Mountain View. And there's 140 spaces on the Los Altos side, and there's 108 spaces on the Mountain View side. And what we're showing here in this graphic is, if you see green, that means that roadway is less than 50% parked, 50% or less parked from the standpoint of occupancy demand. Between 51 and 84% is what's shown in orange. So you can still park on the roadway. You may have to drive a little bit down that block to kind of find an open parking space, versus in the green, you pretty much drive on the street, you can park pretty close to where you want to be. But red would be areas where it's almost fully parked, still not 100%, but you definitely might see one or two open spaces, but you're gonna have to drive the length of a block to figure out where that open space is. We also wanted to figure out, is there anywhere that's just fully parked all the time? And that would have been a purple zone, but in this specific case, there was never any portion of the roadway that was 100% fully parked. So, you can see here the transition through a day back into the evening, how parking demand changes along El Camino Real on a typical weekday. So again, this is the average of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday data that we did. In the morning, you see a little bit more parking demand kind of up towards the northern end of El Camino, specifically in the areas around Los Altos Avenue and Del Medio. And that was visually confirmed from us. That's because of the active development construction on the Mountain View side of El Camino Real around the Del Medio area. So there's a large active development project. And then all this orange that you're seeing is from the construction workers parking on the street, kind of walking to the job site. And during the day, that's maintained up on the northern end. And the same thing happens on Distill Circle, where on the Los Altos side, we have active redevelopment construction on Distill Circle. And so all the orange you're seeing up to the north near Del Medio and Los Altos Avenue, and that you're seeing in Los Altos on Distill Circle, is because of active construction and is maintained through the day. But as we get closer towards the end of our workday, that demand starts to open up. And what you're seeing, what's left is really just, people that live in the area or that are parking for nearby businesses. But in the evening, with the exception of Ortega Avenue in Mountain View, which is a more dense residential community, there really is, a lot of open parking spaces and very, very little parking demand on and along El Camino Real. Same thing happens on an average weekend. So if you didn't see that transition, this was the average weekday. This is the average weekend. On an average weekend, again, with the exception of construction work still taking place near Del Medio and Mountain View, there really isn't a lot of parking demand throughout most of the most of El Camino Real and on the adjacent side streets, with the exception of Distill Drive, which is residential. So you are seeing more residential parking demand in that area, on a weekend into the evening hours, as people are likely visiting homeowners in the area. So part of us preparing for tonight, you may recall we shared with the community, and I know a lot of you were at these different meetings, but as part of the Complete Streets Master Plan, we shared an initial concept plan line drawing for what bike lanes could look like on El Camino Real, but only in the southbound direction or the west side, because it was our understanding at the time that the Los Altos Mountain View right-of-way kind of was the center of El Camino. That actually, again, is not the case, and both directions of El Camino Real are within the right-of-way interest of Los Altos. So we went ahead and actually before I do that, on this same slide, the analysis, which I verbally mentioned to you, was that the parking demand towards the Los Altos Avenue, Del Medio, and Distill Circle areas is because of active construction parking demand. But during evenings and kind of early weekdays and weekends, there's very, very little parking demand on the street. But I did want to note and state it very clearly to you that if we were to consider parking removal to accommodate bike lanes, it would likely require or need, I should say, some type of neighborhood parking preservation to the existing neighborhoods, at least within the Los Altos side of El Camino, the west side, so that as new development projects come online, we don't see parking spillover begin to impact the existing residential neighborhoods beyond what they're already experiencing from construction work activity. Just to make a quick note though, Los Altos does not have a residential permit parking policy or program in the city. I know it's something that will be of interest to the commission and is currently in your work plan to discuss at a future date. But if we do move forward with parking removal sometime soon, it would likely need to be require a concurrent development of a residential permit parking policy so that it could protect the Los Altos neighborhoods as part of the removal of the parking to accommodate bike lanes. And with that, as we were getting into the design criteria of what bike lanes could look like, this is what we set out to do. So one, again, we wanted to look at a class 4 protected bikeway facility on El Camino Real, but at least at this time with no vertical elements. The reason for that is because we haven't seen a lot of community support on past projects in Los Altos for any vertical elements in Los Altos. The vertical elements do typically impact street sweeping operations, which are the responsibility of Los Altos on this section of El Camino between Adobe and south of Rengsdorf Avenue. So if we were to introduce some type of a vertical element, we need to make sure that we accounted for new equipment to continue to actively sweep, to have usable bike facilities for residents to use, or make sure that the existing equipment would work within that bikeway. We wanted to make sure that that bike zone was a minimum of a 7-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer or total 10-foot bike space, and that lane widths were at least 11 feet wide where possible. But I will note now that there are some areas where trying to provide minimum 11-foot lanes is not feasible if we want to maintain a minimum 7-foot bike lane. Ignore the 8 o'clock. Nobody caught that as an error. But we also wanted to make sure that all the crosswalks along El Camino Real were updated to some type of a high visibility marking to really grab the attention of motorists as they're traveling down the roadway. And one thing to note as part of the drawings that I'm about to show you, this is a street resurfacing project. It's not a streetscape project. It's not a protected intersection or other type of facility job. Caltrans will not be modifying curb lanes or medians as part of their street resurfacing work. Each city may want to do that later for different reasons, but what you're going to see in the bike lane concepts that we show you is what bike lanes could look like under the existing curb alignments as Caltrans does their and plans their street resurfacing work. So here's an updated conceptual plan line drawing starting at the north end on the first panel, just south of Adobe Creek near Monroe Drive. You see here, again, we maintain the 6-lane configuration on El Camino Real. We tried to maintain 12-foot lanes along the curb, so to accommodate buses, because there's a lot of bus activity from the Valley Transportation Authority and others along El Camino Real. And if we could, we tried to provide a 12-foot lane near median islands where we knew there was a lot of trees and other shrubbery to make sure that those trees weren't hit by trucks traveling down the roadway. All the red on this that you see on the sides are the existing no parking restriction areas. We inventoried that and put it on this map, or signed no parking locations, such as on the first panel towards the left near Monroe Drive. So the bike lane configuration would be a buffer with hashing. We just didn't show the hash in the drawing here. You see the existing crosswalk alignments all maintained in their current location, just kind of upgraded to some type of a step ladder or other type of high visibility crosswalk location. And as you get down or continue south along El Camino, the second panel at the bottom approaching San Antonio, at this area, we're dropping all the lane widths down to 10 feet or 11 feet in order to maintain a minimum 7-foot bike lane, but that width of the roadway does not accommodate a buffer. So you'll see there down the bottom approaching San Antonio, the buffer cannot be maintained, but we are providing a wider 7-foot bike lane and a wider curb lane if possible for motorists to give a little bit more comfort to bicyclists riding in that space. The second drawing here, it continues south of San Antonio Road out towards Showers. And again, this is along the existing newer development in Mountain View where Safeway is. It's already no parking. In order to provide a minimum 7-foot bike lane, all the lanes need to be 10 feet, including the 2 left turn lanes that feed into Los Altos. And that's the same case on both sides of the street almost down the corridor. And so all the way through Ortega, we have a really nice buffered bike lane opportunity. And that continues down towards Rengstorff Avenue in this diagram here. But there is a portion on the Mountain View side near Distill, across Distill, where in order to put a bike lane in, we have to forego the buffer. So these are the concepts, again, with existing curb configurations, existing median configurations, showing minimum 10-foot lanes to accommodate a protected bikeway, but without a vertical element. So just a bike lane with a wide buffer. And then if we identify opportunities or solutions to introduce vertical elements, we can put them in later, because Caltrans will not be providing that as part of this project. And before I forget to mention, because I forgot to mention it earlier, Caltrans has told us if we want them to install the bike lanes with their project, they are requiring 2 things. One, the formal policy approval at a city council level that approves the bike lane installation along El Camino Real, and any environmental clearance that would be required to support the bike lane installations. Now, parking removal is not typically a CEQA impact, and usually bike lane installations are very, the state has loosened the requirements for CEQA if it's a bike project. So we're not imagining a very difficult environmental process, but we do need to go through one. And Caltrans wants both the policy approval and the environmental approvals by January, so that they can include the bike lane installation in their bid documents, which will go out to bid around June, July, for construction starting in summer, fall. So with that, we can't talk about parking without talking about development. So there are 7 active development projects in Los Altos along the west side of El Camino. One project's actively in construction near down the distal circle area. We talked about the parking impacts from the construction activity. We have 3 approved and 3 pending applications. So approved is approved but not yet built or started construction, and active applications are going through the planning process. When these 7 projects are complete, that will result in roughly 430 new residential units along El Camino Real. Now, technically, all these projects are fully parked, but there's going to be a lot of community interest and concern regarding any spillover from those developments. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that if we do consider a formal removal, that we may want to consider development of a concurrent residential permit parking policy, to support and help protect those existing neighborhoods adjacent to El Camino Real. We did also look in the Mountain View's websites. They have 6 active projects, but I wasn't able to pull from their website what the total of residential units is in those areas. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. It was a little longer than you probably expect. I apologize, Chair, but I wanted to kind of go over that information in detail for you. And so we do recommend that you allow public discussion, have your own discussion today. We're not looking for any formal approvals tonight, but we do want to understand what other data sources or data points would you like us to try and collect in addition to what we've already provided to you in tonight's presentation and your staff report, so that you can help develop a data-driven decision and recommendation to the City Council to pursue the bike lane installations on El Camino Real or not. And with that, that's it. My presentation is back to you.
Thank you, Jaime. That was very educational and insightful. Judging from the number of attendees here, and I know the hour is getting late, but judging from the number of participants on this call, sounds like Cuesta is more important than El Camino. So I actually am going to open it up for input from the members of the public first, and then bring it back to the commission for questions and discussion. Anyone from the participants and members of the public who wishes to speak, this is your chance. Going once. Okay, we have 2. Raise hands. Any additional members? This is your chance. I'm going to go with Pierre Bedard. Pierre, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thanks. Great presentation on El Camino. I just have a few questions.
But you can only have comments, no questions or input.
Oh, okay. Well, comments. Then we're maintaining 3 lanes on El Camino. That's good. Boy, you threw me off, Nadeem. Parking permits in terms of the when 5150 was being discussed, the parking permit issue came up, and I know that I'm well aware of the situation and what's there, but I hope that that's considered as we move forward, especially with all the construction that's going to be going on. And then probably the traffic light timing on El Camino. It's always claimed that, it's just, this is Caltrans, and I get that, but there has to be, I worry a lot about what if somebody blows through Distal on a bike without stopping because, they're on a bike. We don't want those kinds of things happening. How do we deal with that? And the last thing is the adjacent streets. Living in the neighborhood, I know that people on bikes now are using the internal streets, mainly Merritt, where I live. I live on Casita. And I just wondered if there's any consideration for that and looking at improving, not necessarily bike lanes, but improving that sort of natural transit way. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Wendy, you're next.
Hi, yes, I would echo what Pierre said. As bike riders in our family on El Camino, usually we try to avoid it because of the high rate of speed of the traffic. But I also have a question related to the data that was presented tonight. If it was taken during COVID times, it's not actually representative of what parking and other needs are along El Camino. The other thing I had a question about, I know you can't answer them tonight, is Jaime Rodriguez. Is he an interested party since he oversees these construction projects? It wasn't clear to me as a member of the public whether he's being compensated by managing these projects. It would be great to see if he's an uninterested party or an interested party. That would be very helpful. And I do want to thank the commission for opening this all up to the public. I did not know these meetings even existed, but for that little sign on Cuesta today. So I do want to thank you for putting that out so others in the public could respond. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Great. Let's take that input. I think we can bring it back to the commission. Jaime, anything that you'd like to answer in terms of questions or comments that were posed?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess first of all, in response to the last speaker, I don't have any specific interest regarding what decision you make for operations along El Camino Real. I'm here as a consultant to the city of Los Altos to help manage transportation projects, and this is just one of the projects that we're working on. So we did the parking study really in a rush interest because there's a very limited amount of time to gather data, start these policy discussions, because we really have until January to let Caltrans know what we want for El Camino Real. So we did lead, my firm led the parking data collection and study for you, but that's within the scope of our existing on-call services contract with Los Altos. But from the standpoint of development activity, my firm has no interest, nor do we help Los Altos with managing any active development projects within the city of Los Altos. So definitely no interest on our part, or definitely no conflict of interest. And the other last thing I just did want to mention is just like Cuesta Drive, we have been trying hard to get people to participate in meetings. And for this project here on El Camino, we did do a 1,000-foot radius mailer to all properties west of El Camino into Los Altos. We only went 500 feet in on the Mountain View side. So there was, just because there was much more apartment complexes and we just weren't sure how far to go out there. So we went with our standard 500 feet, and we did our typical poster boards, sandwich boards along El Camino Real to make sure people knew this meeting was going on. So not the same level with a citywide mailer that we did for for Cuesta, but we definitely did a substantial outreach for this project. And yes, this data was collected in April. It's in the staff report and kind of noted there. And definitely we would also note that there's likely a parking demand, or less of a parking demand because of COVID, but really less of that. It's just that there's a bunch of empty buildings on El Camino Real. And one of the findings that we mentioned in our report to you is that if you ever really did want to consider a parking removal with a likely less parking intrusion impact to the neighborhoods, this is your time, because there is less parking demand today because all of the buildings are empty. So one of the other reasons why we were suggesting potential parking preservation projects such as RPP policies to protect those neighborhoods as projects come online. So thank you for the chance to respond and provide some extra thoughts.
Great, thank you. So with that, let's bring it back to the commission. Let's try to be efficient with the use of time, please. Questions, comments? Who wants to go first? I think Vice Chair, I'm gonna have you cede your enthusiasm for someone else first, if you don't mind. All right, Steve, go ahead.
Jaime, I have a couple of questions. I'm seeing this for the first time, and it looks like there's a lot of work that's been done. It would just seem to me intuitively that there's a lot more utility if we were in conjunction with Palo Alto and Mountain View in terms of a common approach as to whether or not a bike lane on El Camino made sense for Caltrans. If we acted alone as Los Altos, it's got very limited utility because the stretch that we control is fairly limited. And I'm wondering if you reached out to those two cities in advance to talk about what their approach was and if they're doing this similar kind of things that you've been doing.
Thank you. Yes, we did reach out to Palo Alto, and we did reach out to Mountain View, and we also reached out to Caltrans, and we also reached out to the Valley Transportation Authority. So there's definitely several interests regarding what happens for potential bike operations along El Camino Real. Palo Alto isn't actively pursuing any parking removal for bike lane accommodations at this time. It's just something that's not within their active capacity. That's what we were told by them. So there's, to my knowledge, no similar effort that what we've done happening in Palo Alto. Now, Mountain View has a very common interest to us, and actually Mountain View was ahead of all of us. They went through a parking analysis very similar to what I just presented to you in 2019, and had in 2020 approved an El Camino Real streetscape plan. One of the things that we made Mountain View aware of was that they made an error in doing policy approvals to potentially consider bike lanes along El Camino Real between Adobe Creek to Rengstorp, because it's not within their right of way, it's ours. You know, I talked a lot about that before, and we've suggested that they inform their city council that that is something that they did an error. That is Los Altos, it's just not Mountain View's. And at the end of the day, Mountain View's interest is to provide class 4 bike facilities along El Camino Real, so we have a common goal there. Although they are looking at vertical elements such as curbs within their 3-foot buffers. That's not something that we're looking for at this time, or that we're recommending to you, or would ultimately recommend to the city council, because of the lack of interest for those vertical elements within the Los Altos community, and because of wanting to make sure we wait till we identify the right type of vertical elements that would be supportive of street sweeping operations along El Camino.
So given that, it seems to me there would be some utility in working with Mountain View, especially if there's going to be a 10th school site on the other side of El Camino Real. And we're going to have Los Altos children biking and walking to school. If Caltrans is bearing the brunt of putting this in, and it's going to be added safety for cyclists, I don't know why we would object to that. And it's an opportunity, I think, for both cities to work together. So my personal opinion would be to pursue it without investing an enormous amount of energy right now until we better understood what the likelihood was and how we could work together effectively. And I would love to hear back from you as to whether that opportunity really exists. And that's the extent of my comment.
Thank you, Steve. Cindy.
I'll go. I'm not sure if this is officially a class 4 type of bike lane, but I used to cycle a lot in Golden Gate Park, and they did have a similar buffered area that was on the other side of a parking lane. And in your diagram, it showed like you could have a bike lane separating the moving cars from the bicycle lane, but in the actual mock-up of El Camino, I don't think, can you just clarify if there's meant to be a parking lane on El Camino, or you're just removing parking altogether?
Thank you. The striping concepts for El Camino that we shared in our presentation earlier is full removal of all parking on El Camino Real to provide a 7-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffered space between that bike lane and the adjacent curb lane of vehicle traffic.
Okay, that's what I assumed from the diagram. But what's the difference then between the class 2 and the class 4 if you kind of that buffered area of the parking lane is not there?
So a class 2 bike lane facility is very typical of what is already deployed in Los Altos. It's just, again, a 6-inch stripe. They can be as wide as 8, but usually it's 6 inches based off Caltrans standards.
Oh, it's a stripe.
So it's literally just a white stripe that separates and delineates the space for bicyclists on the roadway in a class 2 bike lane. In a class 4, there is a buffer. Usually people strive for a 3-foot minimum, but I think what most people end up with is like a 30-inch, depending on the roadway. The minimum absolute that I've seen is 24 inches for that buffered space. But to be a true class 4, there needs to be some type of vertical element within that space, that buffer, to provide a delineation to traffic. So what we're recommending isn't a true class 4, but it would accommodate getting to a future class 4 facility if the city can identify and work out with the community the appropriate treatment to put in that space.
Okay, cool, thank you. Well, I was just going to comment that I do like the class 4, the model of those types of lanes. It feels much more comfortable, and it does feel like something that is more appropriate for El Camino being such a wide and busy road. I would actually, and I would love to hear from the public as well, but I would actually consider the vertical element, especially because it's El Camino, and also if Mountain View is planning to do that, to have one consistent stretch that's kind of treated the same way seems to make sense, instead of making it, breaking in the middle of that roadway. That's something that I would throw out to the community and get their inputs on.
If I could just clarify quickly, so Caltrans is building this project, not us. So Caltrans is not proposing any vertical elements within the buffered spaces at this time with their project. If we wanted a vertical space with the project on our own, we're not recommending that as staff. We were looking for that type of policy recommendation to come from the commission if there's interest, or through discussions with the public. But if we wanted it later, we would need to apply for an encroachment permit with Caltrans to install those vertical elements later. But it will not be part of the street resurfacing project that Caltrans will build.
Okay, so yes, now I remember. The Caltrans part of it is just the street resurfacing component. But you did say, but you did say Mountain View included vertical elements in their plans, or is that?
In their long-term streetscape visions, they do propose to have some type of a vertical curb, median space, landscape or not, in that 3-foot space. But none of us are going to get anything like that at the start. That's why in the drawings that I shared, I was trying to be really clear. You know, it's whatever curbs are there today is what we're going to end up with, you know, when Caltrans does the resurfacing work. So there's no changes to median islands. There's no changes to curb and vertical gutters, you know, that are in the field today.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying. I do think it's worth pursuing in general, especially with the added benefit of having the Mountain View segment. I think if neither Mountain View and Palo Alto are going to move forward with this, it probably doesn't make sense for us because it's a very short stretch. That's all my comments.
Great, thank you. Next. Tom, Suresh. Stacy, I know you want to go.
Thanks. That's fine. I don't always need to go first. I just volunteer because everybody else is volunteering.
That's all right. I got to give you some hard time. Go for it.
That's all right. So in the big grand scheme of things, I agree with what Cindy said. Is this only makes sense if one or both of our neighbors go for this. So I think Jaime keeping, it seems Mountain View is more willing. Keeping tabs with what Palo Alto is thinking is also a good idea. The other thoughts that I have is I would also like us to simultaneously look at, and maybe this comes out of our master plan, an alternative route along El Camino Real that's sort of parallel to El Camino Real for our residents. I think we've heard this from one of the public speakers. I think for safe routes to school, this will be really important. So kind of thinking about that in the same scheme of things, because I think the type of rider who will go on El Camino is a little different than the person who will go on the side streets. And maybe if we have a route on the side streets where people then, if they're going to a restaurant or something, then they're just able to kind of go over where they need to or something like that. So they're not on El Camino the whole time. The other thing that I, of course, have concern for is the residents who live off of El Camino. And if we remove parking, I don't want to, you know, make their neighborhood become a giant parking lot for what we pushed off of El Camino Real. It sounds like today there's not a lot there. And when you have these construction parkings and things there, I would like to, you know, explore, like, is there policies the city can have to move some of that, as much as we can, move construction project parking on site. And then I guess the other question that I would like to know as we formulate our policy is, what do you see as the qualification level for a parking permit or some kind of program? You know, what percent capacity levels we need to it makes sense to have a parking permit program? Or did we just decide to have a parking permit program because we just know that so many large residential places are going in over there and we know there's going to be a parking problem, and, you know, to have some level of both approval for parking removal on El Camino Real, but to simultaneously protect the parallel route. I think those are really the top things on my mind. Let me just see if I have anything else quickly in my notes. I think I'm glad for the public who came and spoke today and for all the outreach you did. It'd be good to have more public and maybe some input from some of the businesses along El Camino Real that use this. I think that would be good. And I thought the VTA feedback was really good that they sent us. And then in the other context is just thinking about where, if we move parking, where the delivery drivers are going to park, the ride sharing services that pick up and drop people off, kind of what are we going to do for them? And then beyond residential parking permit, is there any other mechanisms that we have for some of these developments that we already approved to just kind of, at this point, I guess it's incentivize to make sure that they're not using, you know, street parking back in the residential areas? I think that's the key things on my mind. And I guess the answer might be no, but I'm going to ask anyway. When Caltrans is funding the bike lanes here, does their grant also recover the study work that we're doing? Like, is that a reimbursable thing for us? And this is the feedback I have. Thank you.
So just a couple of thoughts in response, if I may. So again, what we're talking about today is really just the El Camino Real section between Adobe Creek and just out the Rengsdorf. So yes, it makes complete sense. You got to look at what are alternative routes, you know, that would make sense for bikeways, you know, adjacent to El Camino Real. People have said Marriage and other streets. But those are not part of Caltrans project, right? So, you know, as part of the Complete Streets Master Plan effort, I would encourage you, when you get to that stage, we'll be there in May or June, that you suggest routes for that. El Camino Real is part of the VTA's Bike Superhighway program, which you all got a presentation on a couple of months ago from the VTA. So, you know, their vision is that, you know, El Camino Real over time, you know, from San Jose up to the San Mateo border, will be a continuous bike facility for people to use. So, you know, do you build it now just because, or not because Palo Alto Mountain View are not doing it? You know, I'm a firm believer in progress, not perfection. We'll never have bike lanes all at once on all the cities, you know, built in a year. It's going to get built over phases. And that's what Caltrans is looking to do. If we want it, we just have to prove it and get that information over to Caltrans. From the standpoint of construction parking impacts, those are definitely near-term, short-term impacts, and we're not seeing a very large impact, you know, in Los Altos, with the exception of around Los Altos Avenue. It's heavier on the Del Medio side in Mountain View, and the active construction in the north is not happening in Los Altos. It's happening in Mountain View on the Del Medio side area. And where we do have construction parking impacts, it's kind of really being contained to Distill Circle, where the active development work is currently taking place. You know, regarding RPP and preservation, I just, you know, we're bringing it up because we really felt that it made sense to. You know, there will be parking loss. Where today the demand is minimal, and that's why it's actually an opportunity for you to consider this type of a policy decision, and ultimately for the city council to decide on it. But, you know, you have to have a policy in place to be able to react, whether you do it now with the removal or shortly after the removal. And we don't have an RPP policy in Los Altos. We need to develop one if this is going to move forward. It could be something that we develop in parallel with this through the remainder of the year. There are different triggers for RPP. Usually it's a percentage of the parking occupancy demand. When I worked in Palo Alto, we used 85%. And you know what? That was too high. You know, that's why I recommended 65%. You know, at 85%, you know, it's hard to find a parking space on the street. You're seeing it on the other side of the street. You're trying to make a U-turn at the next block and come back down, and somebody else takes it while you're trying to get there. And so 65% accommodates the discussions with residents to implement RPP, you know, while the demand continues to grow, if it does, as we exit out of the pandemic environment.
Yeah, let's keep it efficient discussion tonight, Heidi, and let's focus on ECR and then keep the RPP for another discussion time. Any last comments, Stacy, before I move on? Great, thank you. So first, Jaime, thank you very much for bringing this over. When was the last time El Camino Real was paved and striped?
I honestly don't know. I'd have to do a Google Street View, but I would imagine 15, 20 years.
More than that. I mean, I've lived here for way longer than that, and I think it's probably close to 25 years. So 25 years, I don't think the internet even existed 25 years ago. And so that kind of dawned on me that what we decide, what we recommend, what we do in this commission and the city council has a super long-term impact. That means if we don't jump on this opportunity now, our next window is going to be in 2046. We'll be traversing El Camino on canes. Not a good idea. And so I think we have to think hard about this thing, how we're going to move it forward. Mountain View did take the lead, only to discover that the law wasn't really on their side because we had jurisdiction. So they're handing us a template and say, Los Altos, please lead. And we should lead. Number two is, we cannot look at the parking statistics today and gauge the future based on that, because El Camino Real is changing drastically. It's no longer the commercial district that it used to be. It's becoming residential with some mixed use. And we have to make sure that we accommodate the future of El Camino, not the past of El Camino. And therefore, there has to be a mechanism by which all those new buildings, residential buildings that are coming up, we're able to move people comfortably, safely, without having to entice them to use cars. And that is a huge opportunity that feeds also back into the VMT thought process and the policies that we've been discussing for quite some time. So I'm all in favor. I think the mechanics of it, of course, is going to decide whether, how do we create a buffer? I would have liked to see a vertical element, but I understand that Caltrans does not want it yet, so it's something we have to think through about in the next several years. But at least to begin with, we ought to think about how do we put a bike lane and think about the spillover of the parking. What does it really mean? Not only today, but also in the next few years as we anticipate more developments. And back to Stacy's comment, how do we entice the developers to add more parking so they're not leveraging the potential of putting cars on the streets? And maybe we should be a bit more assertive in telling the developers, do not bank on street parking, because we're going to make that a red zone from Monroe Avenue down to Ranksdorf. And I think also, look, Palo Alto is more progressive than we are. And even though they're not putting a bike lane today, they'll get there. They've shown their history speaks well for them. So for the time being, really coordinating with Mountain View, and if we can together with Mountain View put the bike lane through those two towns all the way down to 85, that's impressive in its own right. Now, as far as the other side of El Camino, I know that we're, technically speaking, the jurisdiction is really ours, but morally and professionally, really it's Mountain View's. and while we have to make the decision on their behalf, we ought to take the cue from them and really be respectful of their wishes, and then kind of try to have a coordinated answer that takes into account what Mountain View desires in that respect. Because ultimately, any parking, and half the parking, by the way, that we're going to be taking out is on the Mountain View side.
Chair, I have to just jump in real quick in response to that. So I don't agree with you with what you just said. So definitely we want to coordinate and be professional, and we're doing that. Mountain View tried to do that with us, but they really approved their concept for their streetscape without our interest. It was their sole interest in mind for their streetscape. And so we would end up with a vertical curb on one side of the street, which would not look good for the Los Altos community, would not look good for El Camino Real. So if we control both sides, we should do what's in the best interest of our community. Definitely take their input into consideration, but it's our decision. It isn't Mountain View's. It's yours.
Yeah, no, Jaime, I hear you. I think I'm not necessarily objecting to that one, but ultimately that kind of a position would come back and bite us in the future, because then Mountain View can say, hey, you took out 102 parking spots on my side, you figure out how you're going to replace them. And now we face a much bigger problem than we would otherwise. So I think there's a fine line that we need to walk between what we want to do and how we want to coordinate with them. Right? Anyway, but that's a different discussion for a different day. I think for the time being, my position is I love what you talked about. I'm personally very supportive of moving forward and putting that in place. Obviously, we need more input from the public. We need to make sure we coordinate with Mountain View. And I think, as you've pointed out now several times, time is not our friend, so we've got to move fast. Great. So thank you. I want to keep moving fast here. I'd like to adjourn.
Actually, Chair, I just want to make sure we all understand what the next steps might be here, because we weren't asking for approval. So I definitely think we need more community input. I do want to recommend that maybe we have a dedicated study session in May or June, maybe present the same data. We can collect additional data if the city is interested, so that we're kind of doing more monitoring. We do have the old El Camino Real data, parking data that Mountain View did. We just got it today, but I just didn't have time to kind of analyze it before this meeting. So we can try and extract some of that and present that in the meeting as well. But if there's no other specific triggers, then eventually we'd want to see a recommendation from the commission on whether or not to ask the city council to do a bike.
I agree. Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. The study session is great. I want to make sure in the study session that we do ask the Mountain View, at least BPAC or whatever, the staff, to be present, that they invite their side of that, I guess, what is that, would be the east side of El Camino residents to participate. So we're not just taking that ball and running with it without telling all the folks who are potentially impacted. But I'm very supportive of that. That's great. Great, thank you. So let's keep moving forward now. Item number 5, let's try to make it brief. Everyone had the chance to look at the joint meeting letter that we are planning to submit to City Council for our joint session with them next week. Let's please not spend the time to edit the letter today. Hopefully you've had the chance to read it separately, and I'd like to look at the commissioners to either say you're on board or not. So who would like to go first? Okay, I see 2 thumbs up from Suresh. Other inputs. We got 1 thumbs up from Cindy. That's great. Another thumbs up from Tom. That's a good start. And so is Steve. That's beautiful. And Stacy, of course, you participated, if not drafted the whole thing. So I assume that you're in favor. And I'm in favor. So I think we're all in favor. I think as a fast. Yes. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you guys have put in the work on the letter and the work plan. So I appreciate it. I think it's come together really well. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank Stacy and Cindy. I mean, of course, the subcommittee worked really hard putting that whole thing together. So thank you. That was very efficient.
Yeah, we actually have some comments or questions that we wanted to ask or point out. So one, thank you, Jaime, for updating it, because there were some updates that were not included in the original draft that was updated. So we asked him to upload another version. And second, there are some work plan items that Stacy had called out that are not in there. And so we wanted to actually first ask Jaime if it's because those items can't fit in 2021, and if we want to park them for 2022, or if there's another reason those aren't included.
So, we left the work plan, and I added the draft form to it just because it was developing, and we didn't have a lot of opportunities to discuss with the executive team, specifically Jim, to kind of go in real detail, just because the comments came in a little late from after we had posted the original version of the letter. But we felt it was in a good enough position where we were to send to City Council. And again, we're going to have ongoing work plan discussions with the Commission, and that we can wrinkle out some of these other items over the next month or two.
Okay.
I mean, I think if I might add, I think that document is going to be, at least the work plan is in many ways a living document. So I would expect it to be polished and slightly modified, not drastically. I think the key priorities should not be changing, but the details ought to be adjusted as we move forward through this year and next year.
Yeah, and I guess the best way to do this is maybe for people to send comments to Jaime, but there are, you can see in some places we put placeholder targets for the KPIs because we're not sure what's reasonable or achievable. And so we are looking for the Commission and staff's input on the actual targets there.
Yeah, I'm with you, Cindy. I don't think that if we're not sure, it's perfectly fine to just put draft numbers for the time being, or even TBD. It's perfectly fine.
And it does say draft now. I specifically added that because of that reason.
Yeah.
Great.
Briefly from my end, and thank you, Cindy. It's been a pleasure to work with the subcommittee. I also want to thank Jaime because he's worked a lot to coordinate with us on this project. And actually just tonight, lots of excellent presentations, Jaime, so thank you. Nadim, one thing for you. I was under the assumption, but I just want to clarify it. Did you also want a couple slides from the subcommittee that would go in the presentation with City Council, or you're just happy with the letter? Okay. I
think the letter is perfect from my perspective. I assume since I'm going to be signing it, I'm happy with the way it is. Thank you for doing it. I think I would have my own opening remarks. I'll draft them over the weekend to sort of set the stage for that one. And I think that my view and my opinion is that once the letter would be in the hands of City Council members before the meeting, of course, and they'd have a chance to read it. They've seen some elements of it, perhaps a good chunk of it, back in February when we sent them that the draft work plan ahead of their what do you call it, sort of offsite meeting. And so none of that should be a surprise to them. But I think what I would want to do is make sure that we encourage everybody on this commission to participate in the discussion. We won't have a lot of time with the meeting, with the joint meeting. So please sort of think through one or two key points that you'd like to share with the city council. Many of you have been on board now for probably a year almost. So I think hopefully you've had the chance to sort of think through what has worked, what has not worked, what is it that you want to make better, what do you want to improve or change on the commission side or perhaps on the city council side, and take it from the letter and then sort of share your thoughts with the city council. And let's start to make that meeting quite efficient.
And Chair, just to add in, the City Council's joint study session with all the commissions was actually posted today, and they are just waiting for the letter and for the work plan to be posted, and they put a placeholder for an update tomorrow. So assuming that you're all approving it, I just need the signed letter sometime before tomorrow morning so that we can.
Yeah, I'm happy to sign it tomorrow morning and then make it official. So I think with that, since we're done with the work plan, and I want to thank the subcommittee and hereby dissolve it, there's no need to keep it in place. So again, thank you, Stacy and Cindy. All right, so with that, we move forward to item number 6, staff report.
Thank you, Chair. I have just a few items to update you on, and give me one second here. I just want to get one piece of information. So real quick, a quick update on the Complete Streets Master Plan. Thank you all for your participation in our study session last week. That was great. All of the walk and roll maps and all of the proposed school improvement maps are on the city's project website, losaltoscompletestreets.com. We have reached out to all of the school districts that service Los Altos residents and communities, including the high schools, and ask them to kind of share in their next email blasts or letters that they send out, parent groups, to make sure people know that those maps are up there for public comment. I would encourage all of you, if you have contacts, to let them know that those are there, to give us our input. We have received about 460 specific resident comments on the interactive map online. And that's over about 175 specific different users. So a lot of comments, so one user making kind of maybe multiple comments around the area. So if you go on the losaltoscompletestreets.com site and go to the interactive map, it's actually pretty impressive. There's a lot of great comments all over that map. We're hoping to see that kind of double, triple now that parents are looking at the walk and roll map. So thank you for your input there. You are going to have another study session on the Complete Streets Master Plan next week. And that's going to be focused specifically on the review of the conceptual plan line drawings that were shared with the residents in the early part of the year. And so I do hope to see you all participate in that meeting. Our ultimate goal is to get in your hands as early as May, but more maybe likely in June, a draft of the bike and pedestrian transportation element of the CSMP project, with the goal of reviewing proposed project prioritization no later than June. So we have a full draft of the overall plan ready to take to the council over the summer. You likely seen it in July, and the council's seen it in August, making it available as a public draft before the start of the fall, so the project can be ultimately approved around October, November. So that project is online. A couple of other elements or projects to talk about. We have recently closed bids on a couple of projects. That includes the Fremont Avenue pavement project between, I'm trying to blank, Grant Road and city limits to Stevens Creek. And that project, we're reviewing bids now, but are on schedule to take that for award to City Council sometime over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We've also completed the bidding process for the annual street resurfacing program. So we're going to have a couple additional community meetings on a rush with residents living along Fremont Avenue and Campbell Avenue, where we're proposing complete street elements with those projects. And we'll bring those to you guys as well in the next month. And with that, that's the end of my update. Jim, I know you're online. If there's anything else you wanted to bring up, please feel free to jump in.
I'd love to, and I'll be brief here. And just an update on that Fremont and resurfacing on those bids. We actually got some good prices, but we are reviewing them, but it is going to council May 11th. So we hope to get those projects mobilize really soon. I'm super happy that we have hired a new transportation services manager, and her name is Marisa Lee. I think you're all very familiar with her. I feel a little bad we're stealing her from Alta, Alta Planning, and
does that mean we get discounts now next time we hire Alta for consulting jobs?
They might actually up the price since we stole one of their good workers. But yeah, Stacy actually worked with me on the kind of second interview panel, and I really appreciate your help and input on that, Stacy. But we both felt unanimous that she was the best choice, and we had a pretty good list of people this year. She's a high-level performer, good communication skills. She has an emotional intelligence that I think is needed for this role, given all the public input and work that she'll be doing and working with you all. Her design and graphic skills kind of rival Jaime's, but we'll always need Jaime.
Not that good, Jim. Mine are still better.
And she's got a mix of public and private sector experience, which I find folks in my staff who have worked on both sides of the fence have a skill set that's well-rounded, and we get the best of both worlds in terms of what they've learned in each role in their careers. So look for she starts June 1st, so you'll get to meet her in June on our side of the fence. And then just a little bit about budget. So I talked to Nadeem about this already, but the budget cycle yet again was compressed this year, and largely because we don't have a finance director nor a finance manager right now. So we have been in the process on a staff level of putting together a draft budget, and that the council hearing for the budget has been set for May 18th. It was originally May 11th. So it's now May 18th. So of course it falls in between your meetings. I didn't have a draft to present to you tonight, and then council's going to hear it before your next meeting. So what I plan to do is email you all a draft of our transportation CIP for your review prior to going to council, and then we can receive any feedback from the CSC that we can carry on to council. And a lot of it will, I think the CIP in a lot of ways coincides with your goals and the council goals, so they're all tied together. And that's about it.
Thank you, Jim. Congrats on the new hire. Jaime, thank you for all the service, and hopefully we'll keep seeing you around. And I want to encourage all the commissioners to show up on the May 18th budgeting city council session. I think it'll be important for city council to see you there and hopefully hear your support. So I'm going to keep rushing here. I'd like to get out in the next few minutes. And so commissioners' reports and comments.
That usually means Stacy.
Yes. Ms. Stacy's always ready to jump on the discussion, but when it comes to commissioners' reports,
not to talk.
you're holding back. This is your chance, Stacy.
I will say, after drafting the letter that we're sending to City Council, I participated in the VTA scoring committee for the bicycle and pedestrian planning studies, and I stand behind what's written in that letter. It is real.
That's awesome.
And we're impacted. Yeah.
Yes, that's good to know. At least we are consistent with the county and with their thought processes. Great. All right. Any other commissioners' comments and reports? I'm always hesitant to put us on more commissions. We've got plenty on our plate now with so many meetings that we have every month. So I'm not going to suggest that we attend more meetings throughout the county or different cities. Great. Future agenda items. Not to add more to what we have. I mean, we've got plenty in there, but that's just your opportunity. I'm not soliciting more ideas, but in case there are things that we have
omitted perhaps in our priorities or you think need to be in the pipeline for future consideration, this is your chance. And if there are none, there are none for the time being. I'll take the silence as being none. Okay, thank you. Fantastic. 9 o'clock. We actually beat the time from the previous session. So thank you all. Thanks to everybody who participated for all the input. And good night. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night.